Friday with rapper Oompa, just ahead of the We Make Noise festival. But first, we'll open the phone and text lines to ask about the women in this year's election. What does it mean for Kamala Harris to be at the top of the Democratic ticket? Yes, she can.
I'm Jared Bowen in for Marjorie Egan. We'll hear from the Giver author Lois Lowry about the BPL's Writer-in-Residence program. And we'll talk to GBH reporter Adam Riley, who's been covering the Democratic National Convention from Chicago. It's all ahead on Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the Boston Public Library.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Corva Coleman. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says he is increasingly confident that inflation will soon ease. Speaking at an economic conference in Jackson Hole, Wyoming this morning, Powell said that sets the stage for the Fed to lower interest rates.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
He says that the rate of inflation appears to be back on a path toward the Fed's target of 2%. He's also aware that more Americans are becoming unemployed and that the Fed does not want to hurt the job market. The Justice Department and 8 states say they are suing a real estate listing service, RealPage, for violating antitrust law. The DOJ and the states allege the company's algorithms reduce competition and lead to higher prices for people who rent homes. The algorithms help landlords set prices for apartments. Kamala Harris has formally accepted the Democratic presidential nomination at the party's convention in Chicago. NPR's Tamara Keith says the vice president warned of serious consequences for the nation if Donald Trump were returned to the White House.
Harris acknowledged her unexpected path to the nomination and accepted it on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth.
I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self.
She promised to fight for fundamental freedoms and for the middle class, and said that as commander-in-chief, she would ensure America always has the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world. Tamara Keith, NPR News, Chicago.
Legal analysts say a new ruling from the U.S. Supreme Court involving voter registration in Arizona is likely to confuse many voters in the swing state. NPR's Hansi Lo Wang explains.
The Supreme Court has ruled for now Arizona can enforce part of a new law requiring election officials to reject any state registration form submitted without the voter's proof of their U.S. citizenship. Arizona State University law professor Patty Ferguson-Bonney says many eligible voters are likely to be confused because there's also a federal registration form that does not require citizenship proof.
They're not going to be aware that, there's a federal form and there's a state form, and it may actually make a difference as to whether I'm actually registered to vote, depending on which form I use.
Republican officials have been pushing for citizenship proof when signing up to vote in federal elections. Studies show that could make voting more difficult for many U.S. citizens, and that non-citizen voting in state and federal elections is vanishingly rare. Hansi Lo Wang, NPR News.
On Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average is up about 330 points, or nearly 1%. This is NPR.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. The judge overseeing the Karen Reed murder case has denied a defense motion to dismiss 2 charges against her. Reed is accused of fatally striking her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, with her SUV in January of 2022 and leaving him to die in the snow. Judge Beverly Cahoney refused to dismiss charges of second-degree murder and leaving the scene of an accident causing personal injury and death. Defense attorneys said several jurors told them after the trial that they voted to acquit Reed of those 2 charges, but they remained deadlocked on the manslaughter charge, which led to a mistrial. In her ruling, Judge Cahoney sided with prosecutors who said trying Reed again on those charges does not amount to double jeopardy because the jury did not deliver an acquittal in open court. Reed faces trial in January. Elected women from Massachusetts were featured prominently on the final night of the Democratic National Convention, with speeches from Senator Elizabeth Warren, Congresswoman Catherine Clark, and Governor Maura Healey. In her convention speech, Clark spoke about the high cost of child care, framing it as an issue of national prosperity.
When parents have to choose between their kids and their jobs, businesses are hurt too. We shut out talent. We lose the prosperity parents could create. Childcare makes our economy run.
Senator Warren criticized former President Donald Trump as out of touch with average Americans, while Governor Maura Healey spoke about Kamala Harris's compassion for crime victims when she was San Francisco's district attorney. In sports, the Sox host the Diamondbacks tonight at 73 and sunny in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Oracle. Oracle Cloud Infrastructure is a platform for database, application development, and AI, designed to provide cloud services wherever users need it. Learn more at oracle.com/radio.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming to youtube.com on GBH News. Jim and Marjorie are off. There's a whole bunch of slithering happening. I'm Jared Bowen, host of The Culture Show, here with former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety, Andrea Cabral. Hi, Andrea.
Hello, Jared.
2 days in a row.
Yeah.
We'll start the show today on this moment in politics. Vice President Harris's big moment last night at the DNC accepting the nomination, and women taking hold in politics. Start lining up your calls and texts now at 877-301-8970. Again, 877-301-8970. But first, we're joined on the line by the legendary Lois Lowry. You know her as the author of beloved books like the Giver series, as well as Number the Stars, Rabble Starkey, and many others. She'll be joining BPR on October 1st ahead of the Associates of the Boston Public Library's Writer-in-Residence program reception, where she'll be the featured guest speaker. There's more information on that event at associatesbpl.org. Lois Lowry, welcome to Boston Public Radio.
Hi, Lois.
Hi there. Thank you. Nice to be with you.
Lois, can you give us a little bit of a description of what a writer-in-residence program is? And tell us sort of how does it work?
I wish I knew. I wish I'd been the beneficiary of that myself many years ago. I believe that this is the first and so far only program dedicated to writers for children, for young people. And from what I understand, and I probably don't know any more than you do, the person selected is given an office at the Boston Public Library, given to the extent that he or she needs it or wants it, some editorial assistance, and time, a year, and money. I should add money because that's always important to a writer. And frankly, I don't know the amount, but I think it's substantial. So it's quite an unusual thing to have, and Boston is the city that has it, and the public library.
Well, we wanted to ask you that question. By the way, you nailed it. It does all of those things. I happen to know because I do a fair amount of volunteer work with the Associates of the Boston Public Library, helping to push their efforts forward. But this, as you mentioned, this is significant for you as somebody who published further on into your career. What would it be like to have that opportunity earlier, to give a leg up, and then you see what happens when you publish and you have this whole body of work that has resonated deeply with audiences for generations now?
Well, I'm guessing, I don't know this, but I'm guessing that whoever is selected as the writer-in-residence is somebody new in the career and perhaps youngish. I'm somebody who's been around for a very long time, and I'm 87 years old, and I think I've published 52 books. But I'm looking back at the time when I was writing my first book. I was in my 30s, and I had a house full of children and obligations and a busy life. It was very hard to find the time and the space that a writer needs. The time for introspection, for solitude, all of those things that are part of a writing career, even at the beginning. So I muddled through that and stuck it out. and made my way, but it would have been so wonderful to have the things that the associates are now offering to a selected writer, to have that office where you could close the door and be alone and be quiet, to have that editorial assistance if you want it, and oh my, to have that money, because writing a book takes a very long time, and there's no income coming in while you do it. So it's really a remarkable thing, and in retrospect, I kind of envy the person who's the recipient of that.
Lois, I'm interested, given the fact that the giver, there was this sort of immediate pushback to the giver, in part because of the mature themes, and it was banned in some places for a variety of reasons, some of which seemed particularly spurious to me when I read about them. I'm wondering how you're internalizing this current wave of book banning that's going on in so many different school districts and libraries across the country.
I find it very frightening. I recently did a book tour for a new book of mine. I was in 7 cities, and one of them was Dallas, in the state of Texas, which is one of the major book banning states. And I wore in each of those places a T-shirt that says, "I'm with the band." And there's a picture on that shirt which shows a row of books, and The Giver, a book by me, is wedged in between one by Margaret Atwood and one by Toni Morrison. So I'm in good company, but it's frightening company. And the whole trend toward controlling children's families' lives by banning or determining what they should read is one that has political implications that are very frightening. Book banning has always been one of the first signs that a dictatorship is on the way. It happened in Germany in the 1930s, where there were large bonfires and they burned books. So I would be very concerned about the current state of books in the hands of children and what's happening there.
Well, Lois Lowry, it's been great to speak with you. I know BPR will be very excited to have you back in October, and you're, especially for what's happening to libraries and authors like you right now, it's especially kind of you and generous of you to be at this event. And by the way, we do know this year's writer-in-residence. She is Isis Cano Santiago. She'll be joined at that event with Danielle Emerson, who was a writer-in-residence last year, and of course, you'll be the featured guest speaker. We look forward to that.
Oh, I am too.
Thank you, Lois.
Okay, thank you both.
The legendary Lois Lowry is the author of beloved books like the Giver series, as well as Number the Stars, Rabble Starkey, and many others. She'll be joining BPR on October 1st ahead of the Associates of the Boston Public Library Writer-in-Residence reception, where she'll be the featured guest speaker. For more information and to get tickets, go to associatesbpl.org.
Well, as we mentioned, it's now once again time to turn our focus to Chicago, where last night Vice Presidential candidate Kamala Harris formally accepted her party's nomination for president. Here's some of her speech.
I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know I promise to be a president for all Americans. You can always trust me to put country above party and self, to hold sacred America's fundamental principles, from the rule of law to free and fair elections to the peaceful transfer of power.
Well, yesterday, if you're tuning in, we were talking with listeners about Tim Walz ushering in a new era for men in politics. That's sort of getting away from the toxic masculinity that we've seen in politics. And so now we're flipping the coin to talk about what Kamala Harris's moment represents for women in positions of power. 877-301-8970 is the number to call or text. We're going to try to put aside the specifics of Harris's politics for a moment. What sort of emotions come to mind when you think about this country for the first time in its near 250-year-old history, possibly electing its first female president? It's been a higher energy week for Democrats Democrats, as expected, during the convention, but can we trust the polls, which have her moving ahead, if not leading in some categories? Does 2024 feel different from the energy of 2016, when Hillary Clinton managed to crack, but not shatter, the highest, hardest glass ceiling? Again, our number is 877-301-8970 to call or text. Or maybe you still have reservations about this country's willingness to elect a woman president, Harris or otherwise. We'd love your perspective on that, too. Andrea, I know you watched every last second last night.
I did.
What are you thinking this morning?
Well, the first thing that sort of comes to mind, especially with the clip that you just played, where Kamala Harris, promises to be a president to all people, is just the astonishing fact that even has to be said in 2024. That it's not axiomatic that any president who is elected, regardless of the party from which they're elected, or the party that they're in at the time that they're elected, could fail somehow to be the president for all people. But it does have to be said. And the other irony is that the GOP is making it completely clear. They're making the exact opposite promise. They will not be. If Donald Trump is elected, he would never be the president for everyone. They've made it really clear that they only intend to represent certain kinds of people. So, that's the kind of jumping off place where, where Democrats say, yes, even if you didn't vote for me, I will still do things as president that will help you, because it is so glaringly obvious that the other side won't do that. But what I will say is, this moment, they're going to couch it, I'm sure it's going to be reduced to sort of just women in politics, or, having a woman president. But it's not just Kamala Harris. We saw Catherine Clark and Elizabeth Warren. We saw an electrifying speech by Hillary Clinton. We saw Governor Maura Healey. Massachusetts was very well represented.
Hugely represented. We'll talk to Adam Riley about that in a little while.
And women just across the board being represented at this convention last night. And it wasn't about women being in politics like men are in politics. It was about women being in politics because politics affects women's lives, and all issues are kitchen table issues for women.
I was struck by that, too, that it was almost organic. After a while, you begin to think, oh, wait a minute, this is completely different from so many of the political conventions we've seen in the past, that it actually stood out last night when Adam Kinzinger got up to speak, right, or the Reverend Al Sharpton got up to speak. You're like, wow, this has been actually largely absent of men. But maybe you think this was by design, maybe it was by design, to not make a huge deal out of it, although, of course, it had been illustrated earlier in the week by Hillary Clinton. But this is just the state of politics, the state of the party, and the state of the United States at this moment.
Well, that's the thing. So you're on your way to achieving equality when you are merely present, and your presence is seen as normal, right? Those are quite frankly, in the entire history of the country, white men walk into rooms and their presence or their right to be there is assumed. Others walk into those rooms and it is questioned. What that convention did last night was to simply put women on the stage as a fact, as something that, whether you like it or not, this is a fact, this is where we are. That's how you move, I think, toward equality.
Let's take another listen to the speech last night. Here's the closing moments from Kamala Harris's acceptance speech.
On behalf of every American, regardless of party, race, gender, or the language your grandmother speaks, on behalf of my mother and everyone who has ever set out on their own unlikely journey, on behalf of Americans like the people I grew up with, people who work hard, chase their dreams, and look out for one another, on behalf of everyone whose story could only be written in the greatest nation on earth, I accept your nomination to be President of the United States of America.
This was key, too, because this is a little bit different, I think. Every single politician wants to trot out their biographical details so that we can be reminded, politicians, they're just like us. The presidential candidate, she's just like us. But this is different because not a lot of people have had a lot of time to understand her story. So this was a big part of her speech last night to introduce us to her background, and that she had an upbringing, a middle-class upbringing, like so many Americans. And again, it wasn't necessarily in grandiose language, but just making us understand and relate, and therefore people are finding a connection to that element of her too.
And I think that once people heard her full story, and it was told both by her, it was told in video, it was told by any one of a number of people, including her sister, who's fabulous, by the way, who talked about her upbringing and the village that sort of raised her, along with her mother and father. And there isn't an element of her story that doesn't resonate with someone. I mean, there's whether it's how hard her mother worked, the field her mother worked in, the kinds of people who helped to raise her in her neighborhood, the fact that she had a middle-class upbringing. I think the part of telling the story was to show how much in common she has, at least on some level, with practically everyone. You've got to go, you've got to actually probably be incredibly wealthy your whole life to not have anything in common with her, and even then, you might.
Well, let's start going to our calls, and we'll start with Amanda in Mansfield. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for taking my call. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for calling in.
I just wanted to share that I'm a little worried, similar to what happened in 2016, that we might be thinking that we're doing great. And meanwhile, Trump is on Fox News talking about the border, talking about the economy, and I don't really watch Fox News, just want to see what he's up to. But and I also worry that males that are even Democrats that are friends of mine or in my family just say that they don't like Kamala. There's something they quote, can't put their finger on. They're going to still vote for her, but I do think that men maybe not, they're just not ready for this idea, and they're not comfortable with it, even the liberal ones.
So, Amanda, what I would say to you is what Kamala Harris said that her mother used to say to her when she would come home, and she would say she was worried about something that was happening, or she had some concern, or she had a complaint. Her mother would say, "What are you going to do about that?" So if you know people who just don't like her, my question is, what are you going to do about that? If you like her a lot and you want her to be president, what are you going to do to make sure that that happens? You may not be able to change everybody's mind, but that's really the charge that was given last night at the convention, which is it's fine to be concerned and it's fine to be worried, but to take action to diminish your worry and get closer to the goal that you hold very dear, that's even better. That's even better. So I would say that to you, and I would say that to anybody who has a similar concern. I don't know that Dems are overconfident as much as they're responding to the level of enthusiasm and energy that the Harris-Walz ticket is bringing to the party. But I think you have to, you express the worry, then you follow that up with, and this is what I'm going to do today to make sure that that is less of a factor. Whatever I'm worried about is less of a factor in this election.
Amanda, thank you so much for the call.
All right, we're going to take a break. Thank you for your calls and your texts. Where you're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We're coming live from the BPL, and we're streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
Protesting an autocratic regime can be dangerous and all-consuming. In Iran, dissenters face harassment and state-sponsored violence. Even when it cost the life of his best friend, this man had to keep going.
But it was not my choice. I was in the middle of war as a soldier.
The final part of her investigation into lethal dissent, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Bryant University, embarking on a new era with the Business Entrepreneurship Leadership Center, a 250,000 square foot hub for cutting-edge experiential learning, opening this fall. Bryant.edu. And Boston South Visual Art Trail, including Attleboro Arts Museum, the Art Complex Museum in Duxbury, Fullercraft Museum in Brockton, Plymouth Center for the Arts, and South Shore Art Center, Cohasset. BostonSouthVisualArtTrail.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Marjorie are off. I'm Jared Bowen here with Andrea Cabral. If you're just joining us, we're talking about what's feeling like a new day for women in politics. Yes, Kamala Harris, but also, if you were watching last night, Governor Maura Healey, Michelle Obama, Senator Elizabeth Warren, or our Boston Mayor Michelle Wu and Representative Catherine Clark. It's long, long overdue. Call or text us at 877-301-8970. Again, 877-301-8970. What do you think it was that led us to this moment in American politics? We're looking for your reactions to all of it. Again, all of that, of course. Give us a call or text us at 877-301-8970. It wasn't without attacks last night. We just mentioned Senator Elizabeth Warren, who got a major ovation last night.
It was somebody to Ed Harding on Channel 5 timed it, and he said it was close to a minute and a half.
Yeah, she had to wrestle her way in to start speaking and have the applause for her stop. But here's a clip from the senator's speech where she talks about former President Donald Trump not caring about the working class.
When did he ever fill up a gas tank or worry about a grocery bill? The only bills he worries about are from his criminal defense lawyers. Trust Donald Trump and JD Vance to look out for your family? Shoot, I wouldn't let those guys, I wouldn't trust them to move my couch.
Yeah, she landed that one last night.
She definitely did. She was very moved, though, with I think, and surprised by the ovation that she got and how long it went on. Let's go to Arthur from Boston.
Hi, Arthur.
Hi, Arthur.
Yeah, hi. Good morning. I am hopeful that there's change in politics. I hear a lot of people talking about the vibes of Kamala Harris, and she's joyful, and people can or they can't vote for a female president. And I think people really want to. I think there's some disservice being done to her because she's now Biden stepped away about 30 days ago, and there hasn't been an interview with her. There hasn't been a chance for her to really talk kind of informally with media. And I'm hopeful once people see that, it will kind of show her as a true person versus pre-written speeches or, kind of canned questions. So, I'm just hoping that happens and we go from there.
Yeah, Arthur, I'm totally with you. I think the dialogue around this is building and building and building. She is going to have to start to get before the media sooner rather than later, or town hall sessions, so we can see her more thinking on her feet and answering these questions. I assume that's part of their campaign strategy as they continue this rollout. But it's a big thing that we have not seen from her yet.
But if you're interested, you can see her. I mean, there are plenty of clips on YouTube and elsewhere. Actually, you can. Most media outlets have them. She gets stopped all the time when she's on her way here, there, or wherever, and she answers questions from reporters. That's not the same as doing a town hall. I understand that. But if you're just interested in seeing her spontaneously answer questions, there are lots and lots of clips on the internet that show her doing exactly that. One of a texter, of course it's an anonymous texter, but it said, this person is saying, remember a few weeks ago before Biden dropped out, Andrea was very adamant and passionate that he should stay in. That's the narrative of a cultie who secretly welcomed a second Trump presidency. This is truly one of the most insane texts I think I've ever read that's ever come into GBH. First of all, the person wasn't listening. What I said to Jim repeatedly is that you can't get rid of Biden without a plan. And if the Democrats don't have a plan to replace him quickly and effectively and not turn it into a circus, then you're better off with Biden. And that was the point that I sort of made. And what happened was they did replace Biden, and they did it within 48 hours. There was a turnaround to Harris, and then Walz came on, and now it's moving very, very, very smoothly. So I'm happy about that.
I think everybody can answer it. Everyone works better on a deadline. Look how much you can get accomplished when you don't have really time to get in your own way.
Exactly.
All right, let's go to Joan calling from Salem. Hi, Joan.
Hi, Joan.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, great. Well, I wanted to say a couple of things. I immigrated to this country in 1950 when I was 4 with my mother, who was a single mom. She was really poor, worked really hard, and I managed to get my doctorate from Harvard. So I think this is the greatest country in the world. But I'm also 78, and I really believe strongly that my generation, the older baby boomers, have to get out of the way. We just have to give up power. We've had it for too long. We've screwed it up. I also think we have to give women the opportunity to take more power in this world, because quite frankly, I don't think we could screw it up any worse than white men of my generation have screwed it up.
All right. Thank you very much for the call, Joan. We appreciate it. So all of the older boomers, Joan is talking to you.
Do you do that? I mean, we are hearing a through line from what the earlier caller said about men in her circle who still may not be comfortable with this, to hearing this about the boomer generation not necessarily knowing how to process this and move it forward. Although there were a lot of boomers on the stage over the last few nights, a lot last night actually,
right.
That this is all evidence that there are still many days to come before this election, and a lot of work to be done by the Democrats if they want to move this.
Right. Right, and I think that's it happens sort of with every generation, that sort of reluctance to see a level of change that would be, what it was inconceivable when you were younger, which I think is some of what Joan is talking about. But yes, there is absolutely a lot of work to be done here to make sure that people really understand what's at stake.
And we're behind. As Mary from Weymouth is texting, women have been head of state all over the world, except for this one,
right.
except for this United States world.
We are persistent in our inability to kind of wrap our heads around the idea of having a female head of state.
Let's go back to Bryce calling from the car. Hi, Bryce.
Hi, thank you for taking my call. I just wanted to make a comment on how we as Democrats felt when Hillary was in a similar position here, and being up a few points and feeling like, oh, the first woman president, we're so excited this is going to happen, and we all saw how that turned out. And I think the focus that I talk about with my daughter, who's 13, who watched the convention with me in the past few days, is to focus on the swing states, focus on winning, focus on really turning out the vote where it matters most, and that's what I'll be doing in the next few months, focusing on Pennsylvania specifically. Thank you. I'd like to hear comments on that type of perspective.
Well, I think that completely echoes what you heard from Bill Clinton this week, you heard from Michelle Obama this week, and you heard from others saying there is absolutely, that was the whole through line of Hillary Clinton's speech, there is no need or there's no excuse for being complacent right now, because again, there are many days between now and election day. So much can happen. Everyone gets a post-convention honeymoon. Everyone sees a rise in poll numbers, whether or not you even believe in poll numbers anymore. I'm highly skeptical of them. So again, months to go, and Bryce, as others implored people at the convention hall the other night, this is the time to really ramp up the work, not coast on it.
Well, I think, I think some lessons have been learned from 2016. But in politics, it is easy to become complacent. And I think that's what our callers and our texters are sort of saying, is that, I mean, it's not that it's not a legitimate worry. I think it is a legitimate worry. But then you have to do something about that.
We still have the debates to come.
And we still, yes, and those are coming up, both presidential and vice presidential are coming up pretty quickly.
And the last caller who was employing Kamala Harris to step before the media or town halls, that's very significant too. There is so much opportunity to get to know both of these candidates even more, see what they're capable of, see where they slip up, see where their strengths are. There's lots of opportunity for that between now and then.
And we know what kinds of problems a bad debate can have for a candidate.
Yes, we do. That's good for this segment,
All
I
right.
think.
Okay, thank you very much. We always appreciate all of your calls and all of your texts. We're going to be back after a quick break. It's Live Music Friday, which I know a lot of you look forward to, courtesy of the fabulous singer-songwriters Oompa and Naomi Westwater, ahead of their free festival Saturday in downtown Crossing. Live Music Friday is next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL, streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on the Culture Show, Benifer, which had been Benefraught for months, is now Benefinished. We look at what the A-listers' decades-long roller coaster of a romance says about Hollywood, love, and us bystanders who have been invested in the Ben Affleck-Jennifer Lopez reunion. From there, we remember TV pioneer Phil Donahue, whose daytime TV talk show launched a television genre. That and more on the Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And M. Steinert & Sons Pianos, the region's authorized Steinway dealer, presents the return of the Symphony Hall Piano Event, Friday, September 6th through Sunday the 8th at Symphony Hall. msteinert.com. And Trinity Rep, presenting A Christmas Carol, a tradition reimagined anew every year, playing November 23rd through December 29th at the Providence Performing Arts Center. You can get your tickets at trinityrep.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming to youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Marjorie are off. I'm Jared Bowen, here with Andrea Cabral. Congratulations, Andrea and audience. We have all made it to the end of the week, and it's time to celebrate with Live Music Friday here on BPR. You may recognize our next guest, rapper/songwriter Oompa, from her time performing at the inauguration of Governor Maura Healey, or Boston Calling, or appearing on Boston Magazine's list of most influential Bostonians last year. Now she's headlining the We Make Noise Festival tomorrow. It's a free-to-all music festival taking place in downtown Crossing with the generous support of Mass Now. They'll also have local artists and vendors, all centered on women and gender-expansive folks. Also with us, they lead the Boston chapter for We Make Noise and organize tomorrow's festival. A Live Music Friday alum themselves, Naomi Westwater, is with us.
Hi,
Thank you for
good
both for
morning.
being here.
Hi, it's good to see you.
For more information, go to wmnboston.org/fest. But right now, here's Oompa and her band performing Amen.
Morning. Y'all, I want a piece, I want the thing, I want the keys, I want the lane. If I gotta choose beef, let it come with a steak. I want the flow seats, take the nosebleed if I'm riding with you, gang. I want my peace, I want my space, I want the cheese, put the cheese on the cake. And if the bacon touch down, it's all out the rave. You see my homies well fed, so I gotta say grace. I want my peace, and I'ma stay. Bump a day, blunt, today is the day. If it call me stress, it ain't for me. Spend time depressed, harbor bad energy. But I forgave myself, ain't mad at me. Me a bad chick, me I he. Me I girl, me my pride of me. Me not take no shorts, it's the thighs thick as thieves. Hot comb, hot sweat it out on a Sunday. Burn stage of bad bridges on a Monday. I put it up in blood and sweat and tears, and I'll be, if I don't make it on the runway, I'm going back to the days that we used to play, cause one really much complicated. They out here stealing our childhood, man, get yours back. That's the only way that we finna make it. I want a piece, I want the thing, I want the keys, I want the lane. If I gotta choose beef, y'all, let it come with a steak. I want the flow seats, take the nosebleed if I'm riding with the gang. I want my peace, I want my space, I want the cheese, put the cheese on the cake. And if the bacon touch down, it's all out the rave. You see the homies well fed, so I gotta say grace. I carry the scrolls, I'm cracking the code. You know how it go, you chasing a dream. Dream of these shows, playing my role. Done with it though, yeah, maybe we'll see. Built for longevity under the sun. It don't matter what happens, I already won and I'm playing for keeps. I'm up and at it, they still in the sheets. We not the same and I'm out of your league. Yes, I believe in me, I need consistency. I'm only trying to be where I need to be, where I can see myself growing. Rolling and rolling up peacefully, high as a lick. Look at my life like I'm about to be rich. All cause I dug myself out of a ditch. Glory to God, now I'm pleading the fifth until my work is done. This is embarrassing, you out of character. Oh, now they blaming the moon. High gon' carry your highs to heavens, but scared to face up with the goons. The truth is forever piercing in my soul. Pittsburgh to Boston, we all on the road. My homie Oompa really finna blow, cause we did what we do and you do what you told. Now I want a piece, I want the thing, I want the keys, I want the lane. And if I gotta choose beef, let it come with a steak. I want the flow seats, take the nosebleed if I'm riding with my gang. I want my peace, I want my space, I want the cheese, put the cheese on the cake. And if the bacon touch down, it's all out the rave. You can help me if you want to. Hey, hey. Amen, amen, amen. Amen, amen, amen. Amen, amen, amen. Bring it in. Yeah. Hey, one more. I want the peace, I want the space, I want the cheese, cheese on the cake. They can touch down, it's all out the rave. See the homies well fed, so I gotta say grace. Bounce, bounce. Thank you, appreciate it. Appreciate that.
Tomorrow live too at We Make Noise Festival happening at Downtown Crossing. It's free to all with a roster of singers.
So Naomi, tell us about this festival. This is a true festival. Give us a little bit about the genesis of it, where it really started, and then tell us what we can expect.
Yes, I've been working for We Make Noise for a while now, and I have been based in the Boston area since 2014. And I believe that our city is so talented and has so many amazing artists. We don't always get to take up space on the stage, especially if we are marginalized. And so I wanted a festival that would give women and gender-expansive people, and especially women and gender-expansive people of color, space to say, this is my city, I'm headlining a festival in Boston. We have an incredible amount of talent here. And that's kind of just the inspiration. And this is our second festival. We're so excited to be joined with Mass Now. Boston Women's Market is going to be there too. And Oompa is headlining, so it's such a dream.
It's a dream for me too.
Oompa, we do have an extraordinary amount of talent here. I was just struck by the announcement, I think yesterday, that we're going to be having a big New Edition week here in Boston coming up. I mean, so we're talking about at least 40 years, and it goes way beyond that. And you're part of this.
I am.
And you can make a go of this career with all of the acclaim that you've had right here in Boston.
Thank you. That's the hope. The hope is that we get to continue to have space so we don't have to announce ourselves or ask permission. We just get to be and grow and not think about the ways of surviving, but just like get to be artists and get to be like living this dream from the city that we love. So I'm happy about it.
And living the dream and pushing it forward, because you have an album that's forthcoming, I understand.
Oh, a couple of songs are definitely coming. An album, whoa, don't make my heart race.
I'm putting it into the world for you.
I appreciate that. It needs to be in the world for me. Thank you, I appreciate that.
Naomi, how were you able to, well, tell people what the lineup is that includes Oompa, but how were you able to curate this list of talent from all of the talent you had to pick from?
Yeah, well, in addition to Oompa, we've got Cake Swag, Lisa Bello, I will be performing. We've got a bunch of new talent, too, that I'm really excited about, people up and coming, Dogtail Corners, Ladybugs. I did something a little bit different because the spirit of this festival is not to gatekeep. So I curated certain artists who, you know, I've been a fan of for a really long time, but then we also did a call for artists. And so that's how I got to know a lot of these newer, younger artists that I'd never heard of before. And I think especially for gender minorities and marginalized people, so often we can't get get to the next step because things are gatekept from us. And so I wanted to do that call for artists to see, well, who's out there? Because I only know who I know, and I know the city is so talented. And I was really blown away by all the people who applied. And when I am curating the festival, I'm thinking about when I was a little kid, who would I have felt inspired by seeing on the stage? And so I am creating a festival so that little kids can see themselves on the stage, and a festival that I think represents the population of Boston. So we've got an amazing group of women and queer artists, and so often we're seeing that women are just the singer. And we've got rappers, producers, we've got people who are engineers, people who play the saxophone and the harp, and are singer-songwriters in their own right. And so to me, again, I'm always thinking about who's that little kid in the stage who hasn't seen themselves and needs to know that it's possible for them to be center stage.
Oompa, how would you describe the moment that's happening right now? And it's interesting, I think, that we're talking to you just after the conversation we just had about women in politics, as especially we saw magnified at the Democratic National Convention last week. Let's talk about women and gender-expanding artists who are performing here in Boston and getting these platforms. What's coalescing right now that's making this happen?
I think that, shout out to, I think it was Joan, who called in and said people have to get out the way? I think that's really what it is that, we've gotten out of our way, and I think when we're talking about like culture, I think women and gender-experienced people have always been there. People of color have always been there pushing it forward and, being a part of it, and I think that we're not asking permission to be anymore. So I think that, we're getting to see what truly exists because we're knocking down those doors. We don't care about a door. We'll do it in the backyard. Yeah. Whatever makes sense, we're going to do it.
Which is more fun, too.
It's so much more fun. It's so much more fun. But then also there's like a confidence in Boston, too. We know that, like, we've got each other's back. It's small. It's a small city. It's a scrappy city. We love each other, and we ride for each other. So there's this kind of confidence in who we are, and I love the art that's coming out of that as well. The culture, the art, it's so beautiful, and I'm grateful to be a part of it, for sure.
And if I can add, I think when you've been told your whole life because of your gender or your race or your ability or your sexuality that you can't, and you finally find the confidence to just say, well, I'm doing it anyways, and I'm bringing along all the people with me, that is powerful. And seeing artists in Boston like Oompa doing that, and also kind of with We Make Noise and Mass Now, we're doing that. We're saying, we're not taking no anymore, and we're going to do it our own way, and we're going to make our own space. And then I think what you see in the art world is that actually creates a ton of room for innovation and new things.
Well, you're both artists, so I'm going to start with you, Oompa, and then I'll ask you, Naomi.
Sure.
What moves you to write your lyrics, to write your music? What moves you to create? Is it, and I always wonder this about artists, if they just have all of this stuff in their heads, in their life experiences, and it just, at times it comes pouring out, or is it triggered by something? You see something, you hear something, you have a memory. I'm always interested in that sort of creative process. So starting with you, Oompa, what motivates you most often?
I think I want to make sense of this life. It doesn't always make sense. There's no manual. I don't know where we just all got dropped out of the sky from and just decide, like we're just here on Earth at the same time. It's so weird, right? It's a strange thing. And I think that being an artist is about placemaking, creating the world that I want to be in, making my place in that world, but like also, finding understanding in the existence that I live in. So there's that, and then my hope is that it has an impact on other people in terms of how they get to live their lives, or even if it's just the idea that they can dream or imagine like that. My hope is that it has impact after, but I want to make sense of this thing. And even if I'm making it up, like whatever makes sense, I'm making that up. It's not somebody else's truth. I think I want to leave here leave this earth having understood myself a little bit better, understood the world, and then said, no, if I don't like this part of the world and it's not right or it doesn't feel good, we get to create something new and something that feels whole. So
I think for me, I'm constantly connecting my spirituality with my creativity, and having the two together create this kind of endless well of creativity. I was up in the middle of the night last night writing poetry on a scrap piece of paper because this poem came to me. But I think too, when I don't feel inspired, we're craft makers. It's a craft. We have to come and practice it every day. So sometimes you get that hit of inspiration, but even when you're not inspired, you still have to show up to the page or the studio or the stage and say, I'm working on my craft today. And so that's kind of when some days I hit with that inspiration, like last night I was writing this poem that came to me. Other days I say, today I'm working on my craft because I have to show up for it, because to me it is spiritual, and so it is an honor to show up for my craft.
That's a really important thing for especially young and aspiring artists to hear, that you're not a failure if it doesn't come to you naturally all the time. That's the time you hone your skills. That's a really good point.
It's work. It's beautiful work. It's creative work, but it is work.
It's work. You got to show. If the muse stays in bed that day, you still got to be there.
Right.
We are speaking with rapper, songwriter Oompa and Naomi Westwater. They are both part of the big festival happening tomorrow, the We Make Noise Festival in downtown Crossing. It is free to all, which is very significant. I want to ask you both about just the artist circles. I've always been really intrigued by artist circles. You look at Paris in the 1920s, and you had Hemingway and Gertrude Stein and Picasso all swarming around each other and all fueling each other. Moved to New York in the 1980s, and you have Madonna and Keith Haring and a whole roster of people, again, Basquiat, all coming together, pushing and pulling. So when I hear you talk about what's happening in Boston right now, I just had Cake Swag on the Culture Show the other day. I very much am aware of what's happening in this city right now. So, and it does seem that you're all fairly tight or tight-ish. And how are you all fueling each other's creative process?
I don't know. That's a good question. How we all fueling? I think things like this fuel our creative process. I know that there's artists on that bill that I'm gonna learn about, get inspired by, want to work with, and just connect with. And so I think it just continues to there's already a connection between us in that space. And so I'm excited to see who I get to build within that. But I love that. I love what you're saying because I think that, 20, 40 years from now, we're going to look back and see what happened, and we're going to be like, whoa, that Boston, we did that? And I'm like, yeah, I was there too.
I think for me, it's a few things, is getting inspired by each other. I'm part of the Club Pass Theme Folk Collective, so I'm more in the folk genre. But the scene and the women coming out of the hip-hop scene in Boston is so inspiring to me, even though that's not my genre. And I think part of the work of this festival and the work that I feel in general that we have to do in Boston is we have to desegregate the music scene, because Boston is still very segregated, and we have to desegregate the music scene and come together. And me as a folk singer-songwriter, I'm inspired by Oompa, even though it's not my genre and even though I'm not a rapper. I'm inspired by the way she shows up and how she performs. And so we can inspire each other. And I think what's going to happen, I hope what's going to happen, is just kind of this innovation and this whole new surge of artistry that's going to come out of it. Because we're just starting to really connect and find each other and see each other. And I think there's going to be a Boston art renaissance, and I'm so excited to be a little piece of it.
I can already see that documentary happening in the future, where all of us are sitting around, well, this is what I remember from those times. It's going to happen.
And also, just to add, this is it too. This is it.
Right.
This is a festival that you've curated. I'm standing here next to you. You're an artist, and you're allowing me to headline, and we're crossing genres here, and there's this mutual love and respect. And so I think these are the moments. So, yeah.
And one of the things that I think artists find particularly challenging is the whole breaking in and getting a platform and getting people to hear you. Now, the city of Boston was a partner in this, for this festival with you, contributing some grant money. As you sort of try to think about putting together these incubators that allow this kind of art to flourish, what's the role that government or even private investors can have? Because they can simply supply you the funds, the location. How do you engage them to help your careers go where they should go?
The Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture has been so generous in the amount of money that they've been giving out, and it needs to be the start, not the end. And it needs to not just be the Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture, but the entire community, both the private sector and the public sector. not only is it good for our culture, it's good for our economy when we show up and support artists, okay? So if we can put Boston on the map as an art scene, just like Atlanta or New York or Nashville, that's good for our economy and it's good for our culture. And so we need everybody involved, the artists, the private sector, the public sector, to come together.
The media.
Yes, the media to come together and say, yes, we want this to be an art city. It is an art city. We're gonna put our artists on the map. We're gonna be known, not just as a city with amazing hospitals and amazing education, but as a city with an amazing art scene that is thriving. Right. And so we need everybody hands on deck to do that. I believe the resources are out there, but it needs to kind of continue to have the spotlight. It can't just be a sometimes thing. It has to be an always thing.
So, Oompa, we're going to invite you back over to our musical stage, but just take a quick second to tell us about your second song called Thank You.
Oh, yes. So Thank You, I wrote on my project from 2019. It was the close of that album, and it was just a reminder to stay grateful. You know, life has its fair share of blows that it'll deal. It has its own set of cards and surprises, but the one thing that saves me every single time as an artist, as a person in this world, as a spirit, is gratitude. So I want to say thank you, and I'm dedicated to you guys for having us today.
Thank you.
To all the folks showing up here today, for the folks who will show up tomorrow. So
Thanks so much.
All right.
This is wonderful.
And quickly, Naomi, as Oompa works her way over back to the stage, just tell us quickly, how do people participate tomorrow?
Yes, it's free. Come on down to We Make Noise Fest, presented by Mass Now at Downtown Crossing. We have Summer and Washington Street. There's going to be an art gallery period pop-up, over 20 vendors from Boston Women's Market, and 2 stages with 14 artists. So it's going to be a really great day, and the weather looks good.
It is. The weather looks fabulous.
They're saying it's one of those perfect top 10 summer days.
Yes.
All right, here's again Oompa and her band with the song Thank You.
Okay, we don't have singers today, so that means you at home and you out here are the singers. So repeat after me, y'all. Let's get it. Hey. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, 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 I'm the it's my mama B-Day, I ain't going back to school, sad. You been gone 9 years, no 40 acres on a mule, sad. I'll be God if the homie ain't still real in the that is chasing me, but I be flexing like I ain't stressed. Like ain't no depression, a black Jetson. Boy, it's ain't no time card and it ain't no wage gap. I'm behind that wheel of fortune, no Vanna, no sage like my hitters. I see you folk, that day I pay you for the vision. You leave them know and put a few fries in a bucket when it ain't your stove. But when it comes to your business, you take no shorts. Hey, that's some real for you. I feel for you, boy, they always want me to dance. I tell them if the check ain't thick as me, I really can't. But if it is, then you know I'm hitting that Millie Rock. I hit the bank, the 401k, then I lift my block. Really, what did you ask? Culture groceries get taxed. Black as an Uncle Sam, and I'm black as the back of hands. Black as the magic sand coming back from my pie and lamp, and no borders in pies, man. Back up, we bout to blam like I can't believe I came this far. I can't believe I lost it all. When I think about all I won, I gotta thank you and you and you and you. I can't believe I came this far. I can't believe I lost it all. When I think about all I won, I gotta thank you. Y'all, I'm that black chubby hood rat, big dog with the smoking on that long neck, trying to buy the hood back. I know that they mad at me, I escaped that felony, and if you want me behind bars, you gotta pay my salary. Turn the pain to melody, they trying to pick my brain. Oompa, you do your thing, trying to do that the same. I be like, you ain't got it, can't make a dollar from change that we cut from a different cloth, and your fabric is on my, I don't know how to wear it, I don't know how to panic, I just go like there she go, oh dynamic, she gon' blow, then they mad, cause when she go, she gon' grab it, hit the stove, she won't, she have it, they don't know I'm full of magic, y'all. I can't believe I came this far. I can't believe I lost it all. When I think about all I won, I gotta thank you and you and you. I can't believe I came this far. I can't believe I lost it all. You know it's your turn, right? Man, I gotta thank you. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Pop quiz. Yeah, 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 yeah. Man, I gotta thank you. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.
Rapper-songwriter Oompa, she's headlining this weekend's We Make Noise Festival, free to all in downtown Crossing, 11 to 8 p.m. Thanks to the festival's organizer and singer-songwriter themselves, Naomi Westwater.
GBHnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you.
He joins us live from Chicago, where he's been covering the convention all week. Plus, food policy analyst Corby Cummer on a new app that connects strangers searching for a meal buddy.
I'm Jared Bowen in for Jim Browdy. Then it's the NAACP's Michael Curry on why some companies are backing down from DEI commitments amid a right-wing fueled campaign. And GBH's Callie Crossley on the pommel horse guys pivot from the Olympics to ABC's dance floor. Then we'll open up the phone and text lines. How are you making the most of these last weeks of summer? Hitting up the pool, pickleball courts, or parks? Are you a parent counting down the days until the kids go back to school? Or are you just trying to soak up the sun, taking any chance you can to prolong the season? It's all next on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. 8 states are now suing RealPage.
RealPage sells landlords what it calls, quote, revenue management software. We allege that this software is developed, marketed, and sold to enable landlords to sidestep vigorous competition in the rental market.
The antitrust suit is part of a broader federal effort against the alleged misuse of technology. The Texas-based RealPage denies its software is anti-competitive. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says he is increasingly confident that inflation will soon be tamed. NPR's Scott Horsley reports that sets the stage for the central bank to start cutting interest rates next month.
Speaking at an economic conference in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, Powell noted that inflation has cooled considerably and appears to be on a path back to the Fed's target of 2%. At the same time, the unemployment rate has been inching up. Powell says he and his colleagues don't want to unnecessarily hurt the job market, so it's time to start lowering interest rates.
The upside risks to inflation have diminished, and the downside risks to employment have increased. The time has come for policy to adjust.
Powell cautioned the timing and speed of rate cuts will depend on how the economy performs. We'll get one more report card on the job market and inflation before the Fed's next rate-setting meeting in September. Scott Horsley, NPR News, Washington.
The Democratic National Convention wrapped up last night in Chicago with Vice President Kamala Harris formally accepting her party's presidential nomination. NPR's Deepa Shivaram reports on Harris's acceptance speech.
Harris spoke about her domestic policy visions, like enshrining abortion rights and creating more affordable housing. But she also talked extensively about her foreign policy experience.
As president, I will never waver in defense of America's security and ideals, because in the enduring struggle between democracy and tyranny, I know where I stand and I know where the United States belongs.
She contrasted it to her opponent, former President Trump, and seemed to call out his reported insults of veterans. Harris will continue campaigning extensively now that the DNC has wrapped, but she'll also be hunkering down for debate prep. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News, Chicago.
Former President Donald Trump is campaigning in Nevada and Arizona. Meanwhile, independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is expected to end his campaign today. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 277 points, or more than 0.5%, at 40,986. This is NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. Boston's police commissioner says the annual Jouvert Parade that kicks off the Caribbean Carnival tomorrow will have a new route this year. The celebration will travel through Franklin Park. Commissioner Michael Cox says he wants to discourage people from going to Talbot Avenue, where the parade has been held in the past, after 8 people were injured by gunfire last year. None of those injuries were life-threatening. Boston's police union says they're using what they're calling an all-hands-on-deck approach for the festival, but they say there aren't enough officers to patrol the city and also cover those big events. The Feasts of All Feasts is underway in Boston's historic North End. St. Anthony's Feast is an annual tradition that's celebrating its 105th year this weekend, with parades, religious services, and Italian and American food. Jason Aluya is an organizer of the feast. It's held in the streets of the North End, where he's spent his entire life.
There's great food, great Italian-American entertainment, festive music and marching bands and processions, and there's decorated lights. Our processions are great. We have the Green Procession of St. Anthony.
St. Anthony's Feast runs through Sunday with a full plate of events every day. There's no fee to enter, but anyone under 21 years old must be accompanied by an adult. The judge in the Karen Reed murder case today rejected a defense motion to dismiss 2 charges against her. Judge Beverly Cannoni refused to dismiss charges of second-degree murder and leaving the scene. Reed is accused of fatally striking her then-boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, with her SUV in January of 2022 and leaving him to die in the snow. In sports, the Sox host the Diamondbacks tonight at 76 in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. Fisher's dedicated team of specialists provide resources on investing, retirement income, estate planning, and more. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss.
Welcome back to hour number 2 of Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Marjorie are on vacation. One of them is slithering around Cambridge. I'm arts editor Jared Bowen of The Culture Show, here with former Massachusetts Secretary of Public Safety Andrea Cabral. Hello again.
Hello again, Jared.
We're joined now by Adam Riley, political reporter for GBH, who's been in Chicago all week covering the Democratic National Convention. Hey, Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Good morning, you two, or I should say good afternoon, I guess, where you are.
Yes, it just changed for us, and you can probably be excused. I'm sure you were up very late last night.
Yeah, a lot of late nights, a lot of early mornings. I'm feeling my middle age. The last time I covered a couple of these in short succession was 8 years ago, and yes, I'm a little grayer than I was then. So yeah, late nights, early mornings, but interesting stuff to watch.
Well, give us your take. What was your take on the last night of the convention?
Well, I think the big take is that Harris did a really impressive job closing things out. I thought her acceptance speech was extremely effective. You know, it's a high pressure situation. Everything has been building to that moment. And I think it's not, unreasonable to be worried, given that, if you're in her position, about falling flat. I don't think she fell flat. She spoke for 35, 38, close to 40 minutes. And with this framing that they embraced for the final day and that they embraced for her speech, the Kamala Harris for the people, prosecutor who takes a sort of a greater good focused approach to everything she does or on every issue that she tackles. I thought it was very effective. So that's my big takeaway. And let me offer you another one. This isn't simply about the final night, although it includes the final night. I think that when you look at what this convention was supposed to accomplish for Democrats, I think you got to say it was a resounding success. The goal was to get people even more excited about the Harris-Walz ticket and to get them ready to work really, really hard to elect Harris and Walz coming out of the convention. And over the course of the entire week, I didn't talk to one person, a lot of compliments lavished on Joe Biden. I didn't talk to one person who said that they wished Biden were still the party's standard bearer. I didn't talk to one person who said kind of quietly, oh, I really hope Kamala Harris is up to this task. And I didn't talk to one person who wasn't exuberant and almost giddy with excitement about Harris and Walz's ability to beat Trump and J.D. Vance. So in terms of consolidating the excitement that was there going in and I think amplifying it moving forward, I think the convention got the job done, big time.
Well, Adam, going back to the speech from last night, in a relatively short amount of time, I think people expected that Kamala Harris's speech would be longer, but in that roughly 40-something minutes of her speech, she accomplished a lot, telling people her story, as we were talking about earlier on in the show. She addressed policy issues. She also went on the attack. So let's ask more about what this means going forward, but first let's hear some sound from that speech last night where she called out Donald Trump by name. Oh, looks like our system is frozen. Hopefully we'll get to that in just a second. Looks
okay.
like it's not going to come back. So, Adam,
you can tell people what it was.
Yeah, I mean, we were trying to encapsulate where she labeled Donald Trump as the unserious man. But again, naming the candidate, calling this out, what does this mean going forward in terms of everything she's balancing? Again, introducing herself to a lot of Americans who didn't have a lot of time to get to know her, also articulating the party platform and policies, also being on the attack.
You know, the twist, I think, in the excerpt that you're talking about is she said that Donald Trump was an unserious or a deeply unserious man, but that the consequences of putting him in the White House again would be incredibly serious. And that was, I think, kind of a nifty rhetorical flourish, very effective. She, to my mind, has always been at her most effective when she is in prosecutorial mode. I think back to some of her performances in, for example, the Supreme Court hearings for Brett Kavanaugh, I believe it was. When she's in prosecutorial mode, she can just be withering, clinically devastating when it comes to whoever she is going after. So I would expect that she's going to try to, she can't, I think Democrats, excuse me, I think they're very concerned about being seen as simply opposed to Donald Trump. I think there's a real determination to show that they have an alternate vision. And I think they believe they pulled that off this week, this sort of joyful, forward-looking vision. But I do think that the campaign is probably going to work to tee up Harris to go after Trump in a prosecutorial way with some regularity, both in the debates that we'll have coming up, but also just on the campaign trail. I think it's a mode that we'll see them shift her into on a regular basis, because she's very good at it.
Adam, we've been talking, we did it in our talker, and we've talked about it with each other, and we will with guests. We want to talk about with you the prominence of women at this Democratic National Convention, not as sort of just, I don't want to, the word props is completely wrong, but not just as women who just happen to be in politics, but women who are an intrinsic part of the political landscape and have a place there. What observations, if any, have you made around the number of women and the substance of what they've offered at the convention?
Well, I think, among other things, it's a testament to this big shift that we've had toward women holding higher office just in recent years. I mean, something that we've seen in Massachusetts, when you think about the lineup of speakers just last night from Massachusetts. It was Elizabeth Warren and Democratic Whip Catherine Clark and Governor Maura Healey preceding Harris when she gave her remarks. I am old enough to remember a time when the Massachusetts political establishment was totally male-dominated, and those days are gone. And I think that we're seeing those days kind of vanishing on a national level as well. So in a way, I think using, and like you, I don't want to use the term props because that is reductive, but I think that reminding people of how prevalent female political leadership has become is a sort of a nice way, without directly addressing the fact that Kamala Harris is seeking to become the first woman elected president. It's a nice way to sort of remind people that female political leadership is now normalized, and that maybe the idea of having a woman elected president isn't even as novel as it was back when Hillary Clinton was running in 2016. This actually brings up just a related point. I just want to mention it briefly. It has been observed in the political media in recent days, and I think this is a very astute observation. And I'm not talking about myself because I haven't written about this, but that Kamala Harris, when it comes to the firsts that she represents, or that she could represent, first woman elected president, first black woman elected president, first South Asian woman elected president, she's not spending a lot of time talking directly about those things, the way that Hillary Clinton, I think, centered her quest to break the glass ceiling back in 2016. Harris is taking more of a Barack Obama type approach. When he ran in 2008, everyone knew, obviously, he'd be the first black president if he was elected, but he didn't talk a lot about that. So I think that, in a way, the preponderance of female speakers is a way for Harris to get at that point and to remind people, hey, this isn't a big deal. Women are leading in roles all around the country without having to discuss it explicitly, which it seems she would rather avoid doing, at least for now.
We're speaking with GBH politics reporter Adam Riley. You just mentioned Maura Healey there last night, Elizabeth Warren, Catherine Clark. On the other side, we want to ask you about what's happening in Massachusetts, that all this would happen. But here's a bit of Governor Maura Healey's speech at the DNC last night, telling a story about Kamala Harris, and of course, incorporating a sports reference.
A few weeks ago in Massachusetts, I watched a little girl meet the vice president. Kamala asked her about the summer, her basketball camp, and what position she likes to play. The little girl said to her, anything but defense. Kamala put her hand on her shoulder and replied, me too, I love offense. That's what it means to be for the people.
Now, Adam, going back to this Massachusetts connection, we've already seen Tim Walz here fundraising. Kamala Harris was just here fundraising, just as her campaign was getting underway. She had just been in Provincetown. And then we see, again, this preponderance of Massachusetts leaders getting the prime time speaking slots last night. Why is this happening, and what does this mean for Massachusetts going forward?
Well, the fundraising is happening because we are way, way, way outsized when it comes to our willingness to contribute to Democratic candidates in particular. I don't remember the exact number. I was writing about this. I wrote a piece about this when Tim Walz came to the Back Bay for a fundraiser. We are something like number 2 or number 4 among all states, according to the website Open Secrets, in our contributions to Democrats. And of course, we're a lot smaller than a lot of states that we might be competing with. So they come because the money's there. I think they also come because since Massachusetts isn't a battleground state, there's a hunger, and this came up repeatedly at these morning meetings that the Democratic delegation from Massachusetts had here this week. There's a real hunger, even though we're not a battleground state, to be involved in races that are competitive elsewhere in the country. So Steve Kerrigan, the party chair, was constantly exhorting people to vote early so that you don't need to worry about voting on Election Day and you can focus on volunteering in races in more competitive states like New Hampshire or Pennsylvania, whether it's going down there physically, knocking on doors, dropping off literature, maybe phone banking from up here. There's all sorts of ways to do it. And I think that when people like Tim Walz come through Massachusetts, Kamala Harris, they're not just shaking the tree for money in a way that's very effective. They're also priming the pump for that kind of assistance. And now, I have forgotten the second part of your question.
Well,
Jared,
this,
remind me.
To see all of these major political
speakers.
Speakers from Massachusetts, so our outsized representation there last night and what it means for the future potentially.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I think, outsized representation. I can't think of another state that necessarily had as many people speaking, although to be honest, I wasn't sort of keeping track to see if we checked off more speaking slots than anyone else. One delegate I talked to yesterday told me they thought that having Healey and Warren and Clark speak showed that we're an export state when it comes to political talent. Elizabeth Warren, I think we maybe need to include in her own category, right? Because she made a really strong run for the presidency in the last cycle. And it looked for a while like she was going to be the nominee. It really seemed like she might pull it off until it turned out to be Joe Biden. And I think we saw that reflected in, the reception that she got from the convention when they applauded for what, 2-minute standing ovation, 3-minute standing ovation, bringing her to tears. That was pretty affecting to watch. She's, I think, sui generis in that regard. She ran for president before, got a lot of people very, very excited. Maura Healey and Catherine Clark, Catherine Clark, if she's already got a big job in the House, she'll have an even more important job if Democrats can reclaim the House. And Maura Healey is one of a number of governors, some of whom took the stage last night, like Gretchen Whitmer, for example. I think she's sort of a part of a group of governors who are seen as rising talents in the party. Now, whether they'll get a chance to run for even higher office, that kind of depends on what happens this year, right? Because if Kamala Harris is elected president, then Tim Walz naturally becomes her successor after, were she to serve 2 terms. So I don't want to get too much ahead of ourselves, but Healy's part of a cadre of up and coming, relatively speaking, younger Pauls, no doubt about it.
You've got me rethinking myself, by the way, Adam. I know California had a lot of representation, so maybe I'll add an asterisk for states that didn't have a direct connection. It was outsized influence.
That's the state that I was thinking of too. I was just thinking, California, do we equal California? Obviously, California is a lot bigger, so if we equaled them, does it count as a victory? And we can crunch the numbers math in the office. Yeah. It is higher math. Totally incapable of that right now.
So Adam, first of all, give us an update on where the protests are, whether or not they're continuing. If they are continuing, are they continuing with the same force as the first couple of days? But also, give us your reaction to the statements that Kamala Harris made about Israel and the war in Gaza and Hamas. It seemed as though she staked out at least an initial position on both. And since you were there, I could only sort of see the reaction through the TV in the room. Tell us a little bit about what the reaction to those statements was.
I feel like the reaction from the crowd was akin to the reaction that I had. She went so strong on unequivocal support for Israel and Israel's right to defend itself that it was almost a little disorienting to hear her tack back and say at the same time, horrible things are happening in Gaza and we need to come up with a solution that allows everyone in the area, Israelis and Palestinians, to live in peace and safety. Does that make sense? I mean, the lead-in was, I don't want to say aggressive, but the lead-in was just very, very forceful. There was almost more force applied there than when we heard from the parents of the October 7th hostage the other day, and they were talking about how there's been a tragedy on all sides, and it's really imperative that both sides find a way to live in peace. So that was you're right, that was a notable moment, and one I'm still thinking through. I'm going to guess that for people who are hoping that Kamala Harris might strike a little bit of a different tone on Israel and Palestine, which is something that she seemed to do after becoming the presumptive nominee in waiting, that there might be a little bit of disappointment at the exact way she framed it last night. In terms of the protests, I've seen them, I think I've probably physically in person seen a couple of these larger protests. They haven't been, maybe in part because of the way the convention is structured, there's a big security perimeter around it, there's multiple sites that we're traveling to throughout the day because there are events at this convention center before we head to the United Center, the sports arena for the proceedings in the evening. And a lot of the delegates are staying in hotels that are far away from both those destinations. The protests have not been continual. And I would not say that they've been overly disruptive. There was one day when I ended up taking a bus shuttle in to the United Center, and we had to wait in traffic for like an hour and a half because I think some people had broached the security perimeter and pepper spray or pepper pods had been deployed and everything was ground to a halt. But there's a lot of police around. The protests have occasionally been visible, but they haven't been violent. I haven't seen, windows broken, for example, that type of thing. And I'm not sure if they're going to be continuing. Some of them are sanctioned in that people have applied for permits to conduct them. And then some of them are more organic and just pop up on the ground. So I don't know if we might see more of the latter type in particular in the coming days. It's possible, but then again, the convention's wrapped up, so people are sort of moving on.
Well, Adam, speaking of the convention wrapping up and people now moving on, of course, a lot was made about how the Democrats pulled this together in a short amount of time, the energy that was in the room, the joy that was in the room. Does this, bearing in mind the context of conventions you've covered in the past, we know how scripted they are. We know how organized they are. Of course, they are a week-long advertisement. What happens now, and what do you see energy and joy that does seem to be distinct, at least from conventions I've experienced in the past, or if you look at history, more recent history. How does this carry the Democratic Party through the rest of the campaign? Because we know there are still media appearances that need to happen, there are debates that need to happen, there are any number of things, October surprises that can happen between now and Election Day. How does the party carry what we just witnessed into Election Day?
It's a great question because it seemed like Harris was enjoying this fairly lengthy pre-convention honeymoon, and then the honeymoon just continued at the convention. So now it seems not implausible that it's going to continue in the coming weeks. Bill Clinton, it was interesting in his speech this week, seemed to warn people, get ready for some rough moments because there are, in fact, going to be rough moments in the campaign, and basically to be saying in so many words, you can't expect that this is just going to go on forever. And I feel like, if I remember correctly, Michelle Obama sent a similar message saying that people needed to be ready for some to be resilient when things got a little rougher than they happen to be at the present moment. But I don't know. There are no divides that have been able to discern in the party coming out of this convention, coming out of the 2016 Democratic Convention in Philadelphia. There was this big, looming, lingering divide between Clinton supporters and Bernie Sanders supporters. There's nothing like that this time around. There is, it seems, universal excitement about the candidate who's topping the ticket. So that will make it, I think, a lot easier for Democrats to, they're going to be trying to raise a massive amount of money. Obviously, they're going to be trying to organize as effectively as they can on the ground. We heard Governor Healy at her speech to the mass delegation breakfast yesterday urging people to, basically just contact any and all friends they might have, including friends who they disagree with about politics, to try to sell them on voting for Harris. So I think those are the sorts of efforts, that obviously Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to be everywhere. They're going to be in different swing states campaigning. But for party activists, those are the sort of things I think that their attention is going to be occupied with. You're going to see a lot of people from Massachusetts going up to New Hampshire. That's already going on. You're going to see, I think, people from Massachusetts going to Pennsylvania, maybe some other places. But the pump has been primed for those efforts by this convention in, I think, the most effective way that it could have been.
We only have about a minute left, Adam, but to the extent that you have seen the stories about RFK's dropping out and potential endorsement, I guess, of Donald Trump and the polling of his supporters and where that support goes, if you've seen that, can you give us a little comment on that?
The sense that I've gotten from periodically looking at polls that run with Harris with RFK Jr. and without him, is that there might be a little bit of a bump for Donald Trump, for people who want to vote for a kind of a disruptive, outside the mainstream political type figure, but that if there is a bump for Trump, that it won't be seismic, that it's not a gargantuan game changer. And, Kennedy, my sense, I don't know if you two agree, I feel like he's been mostly an afterthought for the better part of this campaign, notwithstanding that, New Yorker story that talked about that weird thing where he found a dead bear cub and dropped it off in Central Park. It was sort of like that was the most attention that he got in the campaign. So I don't think it's going to all of a sudden catapult Trump into the lead in places where we've seen him trailing. And I also don't think it's going to change. I don't think it's going to be a big momentum shifter. That's my 2 cents.
Well, yeah, Adam, I think that's easier math to do because there wasn't the sizable support that seemingly would make that much of a difference to either campaign. Great to see you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
exactly.
Adam. Safe travel
All right, thanks,
home.
you too. Talk to you later. Appreciate it.
We've been speaking with Adam Riley, GBH News' political reporter, who's been in Chicago all week covering the Democratic National Convention. Coming up after a quick break, our food policy analyst, Corby Kummer. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
The singer Dhruv says the songs on his debut album helped him as he grappled with his identity. He calls the album Private Blizzard.
I grew up queer in Singapore, and even now, it's not super accepted, and the last couple of years have been heavy and turbulent in different ways, and I kind of came back to that phrase.
I'm Elsa Chang. Hear my conversation with Dhruv on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And the American Repertory Theater, presenting Romeo and Juliet, a bold new staging of Shakespeare's iconic love story, directed by Tony Award winner Diane Paulus, opens August 31st. Tickets and more at amrep.org. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming to youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Marjorie are off. I'm Jared Bowen, here with Andrea Cabral. Joining us now via Zoom is food policy analyst Corby Kummer. He's executive director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute, a senior editor at The Atlantic, and a senior lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. Hi, Corby.
Hi, Corby.
Hey, Jared. Hi, Andrea.
So, Corby, Starbucks recently opened up a location on Belmont Street in Brockton, and they just announced that they intend to close their dining room between 1:30 p.m. and 3 o'clock p.m. on weekdays during the school year, and they specifically say it's to deter kids from leaving Brockton High School, I guess, and other schools to the extent that there are others nearby, and hanging out there. What do you think of that?
And same thing, by the way, I saw on WBZ the other night for the McDonald's in the same neighborhood.
Right, McDonald's, I think, is locking the door and letting people in one at a time. At first, I thought, they don't want the real estate of the tables occupied by kids who maybe buy one thing and then don't keep essentially paying rent money on the tables they occupy. But it seems to be something about security and worried about fighting because there have been a lot of security incidents in Brockton. They just aren't saying that publicly. I think it's the same reason for McDonald's, because there have been a lot of security incidents. The mayor of Brockton says this is a wonderful new addition to downtown. We expect them to stay open the full day during business hours. But they haven't replied. They haven't said this is a matter of security for our team members. So it's hard to know what to make of the story.
And I was just going to ask how we look at this in the context of earlier, uglier headlines about Brockton High School and calls for the National Guard to come in, which were not answered by the governor. And there were disputes about just how the circumstances were in Brockton High School, just as I think people are wondering, well, how bad can it be that these restaurants have to do this? But maybe there is evidence there. It's a delicate, fine line that they have to walk here, both institutions, Starbucks and McDonald's.
Usually they say something. That's what. So I'll go ahead, Andrew, but I'll just say that in Washington, Starbucks was one of only 2 vendors of coffee, and they pulled out because they said there's just too much security problems in the train station.
Well, they're going to. I guess they're going to keep the drive-through open, and I guess you can come in and walk up to the counter and you can order. But when you analyze this from a retail perspective, do you assume, like I sort of did, that they made the calculation about how much money they would be losing by closing the dining room to everybody and decided it was worth it? Is that, like, what's the analysis that goes into saying we're going to close during regular business hours?
I assume it's just plain security, or saying we don't want the tables to be hogged and our other customers don't have a chance to sit and they don't want to talk to students. But if they would actually explain themselves, it would make it easier for us to comment.
Okay.
Well, Corby, let's move on to something else that is still a little raw for me, because a couple of months ago I was actually having dinner with Jim and Marjorie, and it was made very clear to us later on during the dinner that it was time for us to go because and this is being reported in the New York or Grub Street, I should say, as well, that more and more restaurants are starting to apply pressure because they want to turn the tables over. They want to get more cycles so they can get more revenue. But I can tell you that Jim was not very happy that night. Actually, none of us were very happy that night, because if you're going to a restaurant, you're sitting down, you're spending a fair amount of money, because it does cost a fair amount of money to dine out now, and then to be rushed out the door, it just makes the experience less fun. Where do you come down on this, knowing that restaurants are also, it's a difficult business model?
So what interested me is that a number of restaurants interviewed in this piece in Grub Street, which was started by New York Magazine, say, we need 3 turns, not 2.
Right.
So we've got to have that 3rd turn, or else we're never going to be able to break even. It's been so hard for restaurants to figure out how to make it economically during, and then if they were allowed, if they were able to stay open after the pandemic, how do they stay in the black? But what this article said is that it's becoming a policy that's announced when you make your reservation on Resi or another platform. So Jared, were you, Jim, and Marjorie told when you sat down, sorry, you're going to have to be out in 90 minutes?
Well, that's what I'm trying to remember. I don't remember anything like this, but I know that there were so many things we see now, and I did. No, you know what? I didn't. I made it in person, actually. I made the reservation in person, so I didn't see anything online about the clock starts ticking the moment you sit down and you have 90 minutes.
It's more than that. They should have told you when they sat you, when they gave you the menus, and say, we really want you to enjoy this, but we remind you, as we said when you made your reservation, we need to free this table in 90 minutes. As the Grub Street piece pointed out, all of us are used to showing up at a restaurant and begging for a table, and they're saying, yeah, we'll let you in, but there's somebody coming at 8 o'clock for that reservation. It's 6:30 or 7. That's the contract you've made verbally when you sat down. So you can't really begrudge it because you said, oh, fine, just seat us. We were hungry. Whereas you can't even remember if they told you. That's like bad management.
I have to say, I kind of feel like, I don't mind if I'm asked to leave after a certain period of time, because I get the turning of the tables. And there are people that will just kind of sit there, sort of interminably nursing like the last few sips of coffee. But Corby, there are times when restaurants, like during a downturn time, there are restaurants that want people to stick around longer to make the place look fuller. Right?
Yeah,
so it kind of cuts both ways.
There was such a good piece by Pete Wells, who after 12 years is leaving the Times, talking about not liking the automation of the check dropping and paying policy. He likes human beings, but he did start off by saying, in the 12 years I reviewed restaurants, I would estimate I spent 3 months waiting for the check. So all of us have had those interminable, how do you flag down the server? In this case, the piece was full of little tips that the servers and the management use to drop your menus fast, to get your drink order fast, to dissuade you from ordering a white wine that would require 15 minutes of chilling because they don't have 15 minutes to do it, dropping the check the minute you put your spoons down from your creme brulee. So that's all good and efficient, but it's deceptive if they don't remind you at the beginning of your meal, we do have this table booked in 90 minutes. We ask that you be gone in 90 minutes.
Yeah, it's just not fun. It's just not fun. You don't want to go and realize, okay, now I'm in a race to finish everything. It's just not fun.
I like. Can we get you anything else with that kind of like? Don't say yes. Yeah. Don't say you want anything else because they're not bringing it.
As they're taking your plate away while your fork is still midway there.
Whereas my spouse, who always wants to go home early, thinks this would be just the best policy ever.
Yeah. Let's now talk about Corby Kummer, Wally Amos, the founder of famous Amos Cookies, who died recently at age 88. So at least we know he lived a full life. I don't think I realized how full a life.
Yeah.
This is a really extraordinary biography of Wally Amos. Tell us about it.
Well, first of all, it's been a bad year for premium chocolate chip cookies because David of David's Cookies died this year too. So this is famous Amos. He was a talent agent who started in 1975 with a $25,000 loan from famous singers. You'll remind me who they are.
Helen Reddy was one of them.
Otis Redding.
That's right.
And Helen Reddy.
As a talent agent, which was really hard for an African American to break into, and he started in 1961, really young. He built a bricks and mortar place on Sunset Boulevard. It was a huge hit. He was really good at shutting down the block for block parties and stocking his parties with celebrities through his talent agent connections. He was a tireless promoter, and he had a straw Panama hat and Hawaiian shirts before Trader Joe's had Hawaiian shirts. And he went around the country. He was really good at promoting. He wasn't so good at the bottom line. And so eventually, I think by 1988, he had to sell. He became a celebrity for himself. It was Marvin Gaye and Helen Reddy.
Oh, not
who were
that's right. Yeah, sorry.
original backers. But he couldn't keep the business running. And he became bitter. He stayed on for a year as spokesman afterward. But then he became a tireless advocate for childhood literacy because his mother had never learned to read and he learned to read late. And he made that his signature cause. So a really admirable and interesting person.
You know, one of the things about this story, though, that made me a little bit sad was the part where they described that in 1991, he launched a new cookie venture. He called it Wally Amos Presents. But the current owners of Famous Amos sued him for trademark infringement. He tried to change the name of the company to Uncle No Name. It took 2 more years of litigation, and they finally say to him, yeah, okay, fine. You can use the Uncle Wally name, but you can't sell cookies, so he had to sell muffins. I mean, that just made me sad to see that it became so contentious, and they sued him for trademark infringement when he started this entire thing using a grandmother's recipe for these cookies.
Aunts. But, you know,
An aunt's recipe, I'm sorry.
It's sadly common that people lose control of their name. And so when you sell a business that has your name on it and they say, we're going to use this in all of our trademark, you have said goodbye to your name for a long time. And so, you know, for example, the wonderful coffee roaster and pioneer George Howell, locally, he was able to use his name because Coffee Connection was his business, which he was never able to use again. But then after 10 years of a no-compete contract with Starbucks, he was able to invent something under his own name. That's the exception. It's not coming to me now, but there are many famous brands of people who completely lost control of their name.
Well, it was just nice to read also that even if he did lose the business, he still kept at it in different ways, as you say, with literacy, and then seeing his articles of clothing go into the Smithsonian and just be recognized
that is something.
nationally for his contributions in
Maybe
so many
Aiden and
regards.
Jamin can look. It might have been Mrs. Field herself of another chocolate chip
That
cookie.
would make sense. You know, that would make sense. And Famous Amos came before Mrs. Fields, but I think you're right. I think her name was Debbie Fields. She lost control of her name as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we're speaking with food policy analyst, writer Corby Kummer. Corby, there's a really devastating story that's come out. Andrew and I were talking about this before the show. Frankly,
it's awful.
It's just more of the same, but in a whole industry we didn't know about this time, but more abuses, more horrible things happening. This time, it's about the sugar industry.
So what really stood out to me, first of all, it's in India. Did I know that India was the second largest sugar producer in the world? No, I should have, but I did not. And they're forcing women to enter childhood marriages so that they can work side by side with their husbands in the field, and much worse, forcing them to have hysterectomies so that they won't have periods that keep them out of labor. A shocking 18th century. You think this is hundreds of years old, this kind of cruel practice, but also the parallels to the sharecropping system that would year after year cheat black farmers out of their actual share of the profits by turning them into indentured servants. In this case, they have to borrow from employers to get these forced hysterectomies for something like a painful period that should not have required a hysterectomy in the first place. Then they're in debt. So it's advances. The whole farming system is founded on advances from the employer that then the employer makes difficult to pay back. So they become essentially indentured servants / slave. It's really shocking. The most shocking part for me was aside from these horrendous practices, that there's a company called Bon Sucro, Good Sugar, Bon Sucro, that said it was guaranteeing fair labor practices, and it was turning a blind eye to these hysterectomies, which it knew. And major brands like Coke, PepsiCo, Unilever, and General Mills said, you know, our producers are Bon Sucro certified, so we're fine. We're not using forced labor. So the idea that the certifying agency, which is supposed to guarantee fair trade and fair treatment of labor, is itself corrupt and inattentive, is what's really scary, because it sort of raises doubt about the entire certification system.
Well, these organizations like Coca-Cola, Unilever, and General Mills, they shouldn't get off on placing blame on this other agency and relying on their standards. Isn't it incumbent upon businesses, especially like Coca-Cola, to do their own investigation, especially in these times where we're more and more exposed to these horrific human rights abuses?
We may think so, but if they say, no, we're only contracting with, you know, like one fair wage and fair trade, those have excellent reputations, and I'm sure that they're very careful, especially fair trade, about guaranteeing the conditions of work. Coffee Kits is another. I trust those brands. You know, I trust those certification system. But, you know, for example, Whole Foods didn't go with the Animal Welfare Institute. It decided we have our own certification. So maybe, Jared, you would prefer that because it's the company saying we take responsibility. But if they're not a third-party certifier, they don't have a lot of incentive to make all of their criteria and inspections transparent.
The part that I don't understand, and it could very well be that somehow this isn't a crime in India, is a forced medical procedure, a hysterectomy, which also means that you will not ever have children. Forced hysterectomy for the purpose of enriching the bottom line of the sugar industry and certain companies in particular. How is that not a crime? How is that not a crime somewhere? You know, I don't know. I know there's not an international criminal court that's going to look at something like this, but how is that not a crime? And why aren't they at least going after the doctors who are performing these procedures on these young girls?
We're imposing standards that we think other countries should have, and we don't know. If the doctors have a fig leaf of saying, oh, the woman was having painful periods, or they can invent some reason for a problem that caused them to say you need a hysterectomy. Forced sterilization in China and Russia. There have been so many examples, and I don't know of an international human rights court that has taken these countries to task. The New York Times was taking credit for an investigation into the sugar industry that uncovered the inattentiveness of Bon Sucro, the certifying organization, in the first place, which forced a task force of Bon Sucro and the companies like Coca-Cola to saying, we're now keeping a more attentive eye on this, as you, Jared, think they should. But I don't know where the laws are that compel any of this fair treatment or supervision.
Well, and Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, basically their response is, well, we only buy a little bit of sugar from them. So we're kind of, you know, we're not really responsible because it's not like we buy a lot from them, which, you know, for Americans, we were used to pushing back on companies. Maybe that's what should be happening here, is that we should be pushing back.
That way lies large companies. Apple was busted for forced child labor from Foxconn in Hong Kong, and it cleaned that up. Nike, you know, all of these companies that have faced forced labor, it's in Southeast Asia, it's in other countries, and they claim not to have known. And then once an investigation brings it to light, usually they're shamed into action.
Well, I hope the shaming continues, because also it was sort of another trigger there that to say task force. How many times have we heard the words blue ribbon commission or task force applied? It seems like a public relations strategy, as in we're looking into it, and how often do they do the work? So I agree with you, Andrea. Public pressure needs to be applied.
Yeah.
Well, to switch to something much lighter now, we have talked about loneliness, especially coming out of the pandemic. There are loneliness epidemics all around the world. It's considered a health, if not crisis, certainly something that very much needs to be dealt with, again, internationally. But now there's an app for that, as we see with restaurants. What's happening?
Apparently there's like 200 apps for this. First of all, we should credit our wonderful Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, for making this a national priority and talking about loneliness as a real disease. So this is people who are tired of dating apps and actually don't want the fatigue of trying to find a romantic match, but do want to find friends and companions, especially if they move from overseas to the U.S., or they're transferred, or they've had a breakup and they need to reconstitute their friends. This was an app that the reporter named Lisa Bonos from the Washington Post used, and she found it was the breakfast. She didn't use the breakfast. It was a lunch app, Creative Lunch Club, in which you would be matched one-to-one or with a group, which she said she would prefer, to find other people who are not in your profession. For example, Breakfast Club in Silicon Valley is deliberately for people who want to get out of the tech trenches and only find people in the tech business. In Washington, I think where this journalist was based, she was saying, I had the night beat. So it was almost impossible for me to find or make new friends. I know what that's like. So the Creative Lunch Club was exactly right for her. But a woman she quotes at the end, who's the author of The Art and Science of Connection, Why Social Health is the Missing Key to Live Longer, Healthier, and Happier, said that every week she hears about a new app. And that once you're out of college, or once you're out of a way of always meeting people because you're constantly being exposed to new people, it's very hard. And what this piece didn't particularly make a thing of, it's the rise of remote work after the pandemic. In so many ways, it's preferable, but when you switch jobs, as people do much more frequently than they used to, how do you hang out with people enough to know whether you'd be interested in having them as friends or not when you're doing your laundry and cleaning your kitchen instead of going into the office?
Well, last week, Corby, we talked about the sort of decrease that restaurants are seeing in their bottom line. We talked about, the barbecue place where he counts the trays, and that's kind of how he knows whether or not business is going well. This seems to me like a potential good marriage between the restaurants who need the patrons and an app. I don't know how you get on, how you decide what restaurants you're going to go to, but an app that has people meeting at some of these places that need to have an increase in customers.
And maybe they can give a discount if you'll be out in 90 minutes.
See, I was just thinking for this, I would take 60 minutes because you don't want to be trapped for 90 minutes with somebody you just met and you might not enjoy. So
that's the 60-minute limit.
I'm on board with this.
Excellent.
It's great to see you, Corby.
Good to see you, Corby.
Great to see both of you.
Corby Kummer is the Executive Director of the Food and Society Policy Program at the Aspen Institute. He's a Senior Editor at The Atlantic and a Senior Lecturer at the Tufts Friedman School of Nutrition, Science, and Policy. After a quick break, GBH's Callie Crossley is here with the latest George Santos update. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the...
This week on Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, visitors, then homeowners. In the 19th century, African Americans first settled on Martha's Vineyard, navigating racial animus, pioneers paving the way for today's vibrant Black Island community. That's Under the Radar with me, Callie Crossley, Sunday night at 6 here on 89.7 GBH and the GBH app.
Support for our programs comes from you.
And Mass General Brigham Health Plan. Innovative plans, coverage, and a broad network of doctors. Mass General Brigham Health Plan, with you every day. For more information, you can visit massgeneralbrighamhealthplan.org. And the Adventure Park at Heritage Museums and Gardens. Zip line and climbing trails for all ages, 7 days a week this summer, rain or shine. More at myadventurepark.com.
I'm Nicole Garcia, producer for BPR, and you're listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR, what matters to you.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Marjorie are off. I'm Jared Bowen, here with Andrea Cabral. We're joined at the BPL desk by Callie Crossley. Callie is host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley, which you can catch Sunday nights right here on 89.7 at 6 o'clock. You can also hear her Callie commentaries on Mondays for GBH's Morning Edition. She's also co-host for GBH's The Culture Show, which I know something about, which airs daily at 2 o'clock right here on 89.7, including today's Week in Review live at the Boston Public Library. So I guess this is a rehearsal for us.
Rehearsal. Yes, what's good about that? That's
good to see you.
Callie, I'm going to go way out on a limb here today.
Go on.
And suggest that perhaps you watched the last night of the convention.
I did.
And suggest that perhaps you had a reaction to it.
It was so interesting. I kept, at one point I was like, how many people are going to be before we hear Vice President Harris, now I guess the official Democratic nominee. But as I was, kind of doing my internal questioning, that every person that came up offered something different and interesting. Even the people I thought wouldn't be, like the sheriff of whatever, wherever.
Yeah, in Michigan. It's a county in Michigan. Yeah.
Right, and I was like, okay, why is he talking? We just get to the point. But it turned to be interesting. So I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the crowd reaction. It was just, I even enjoyed the moment where President Biden and Jill sent their post to say, we're here, we're watching, we're supportive. It was just all very interesting and kind of exciting, because watching the people in the crowd was a lot.
Wait, what did you think of her speech? Obviously, there was so much anticipation, and we know that she was on the road a lot before she even arrived in that convention hall.
I kept wondering, when does she sleep?
Because I know. Well, I always wonder a couple things. First of all, who's the speechwriter? And I'm just nosy about that, and I don't think it's come out yet.
Not that I've seen.
But whomever seemed to really have a sense of her, which is what you want. I was anxious to see how she was going to address the Israeli-Hamas war. I think everybody thinks that she did it to the best of her ability. By that I mean she's in an administration that she cannot diss, but she has to make it clear where her stand is, and the crowd seemed to respond. From some of the analysis that I've read and heard this morning, some people feel that she should have, but I don't know if this is her role anyway, have pushed more to have a Palestinian person, American person, actually speak. And there was some controversy around that, as people know. But other than that, most people seem to feel that there wasn't a misstep. This was not supposed to be a speech at this venue where she gives very, very detailed comments about the policy, and she did not, but she just made it clear where she's standing on certain issues. Now, personally, just from an emotional, I know this has nothing to do with anything, but I loved when she started saying, "Hi, happy anniversary, Dougie. I love you so much." I mean, I know. I'm just a big old sap. So that kind of got me.
Yeah, there was a lot of actual talk about love.
Yeah.
All throughout the convention.
Which I loved it.
Familial love. She actually said in her speech.
Oh, I love that part.
Not family by blood, but family by love, about the people that raised her.
That got me too.
Bringing love back into the world of politics, or into the world through the world of politics is I think it's worth a little bit of something. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to go from what I would suggest is the sublime to the absolutely ridiculous. and you know what? I'm going to let Jared do this, because we were giggling about this before you came.
And I wasn't going to start with the good ones. So there were two big losses, two big court activities, actions for George Santos. We're going to save up what I quote-unquote the good one for second, but the first would be that he pled guilty to federal charges this week. These were aggravated identity theft and wire fraud charges. Now $373,000 fine and prison time. This is a huge about-face, of course, from George Santos.
You know what? Here's the thing, Jared, that always gets me. That guy stood before about 1 billion microphones and said, "I did not. Don't accuse me. How dare you? You people are so always trying to make stuff up, blah, 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 blah." And I always think to myself, how do you just stand there and just lie? I mean, he didn't admit to anything at that point.
Right.
I mean, I maybe could have, and I think others maybe could have gone with him a little better if he said, all right, well, maybe I, did some identity
cheating. Maybe I did that, but the rest of the stuff, no.
He didn't even flinch.
No, he just lied.
Right. It was a huge conspiracy against people like him who was outspoken in Congress, and he tried to stay in Congress.
I mean, it's beyond. Once again, I'd love to hear from his, former constituents, because what I was hearing leading up to it, they were just furious because he was, of course, not representing them at all. I mean, as a person, and certainly not as the person who's supposed to be taking care of their business, because he had too much activity doing all this illegal stuff. I mean, it is just really outrageous. You got to have a lot of something to be able to do that, it seems to me.
Well, I think it's probably good that three of us can't understand how you can do it, because if you can understand it, then you're capable of repeating it yourself.
I've written about this a long time ago. I went to Cuba, and I put some Cuban cigars in my boot and sweated and carried on. And I got to the other side, and my friend who was traveling with me said, "My God, do you ever lie about anything? You're such a giveaway." She said, "Clearly they know you had something on you. What were they going to do, put you in jail? No, they would take the cigars and smoke it.
Right.
Calm down." Right. So I can't even get to this guy.
Well, the chutzpah that you're talking about, having to have to be him, that goes to the second one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
This is the one that I get.
This is the one that makes him laugh.
I was crying. I was laughing so hard this morning because I had forgotten some of the quotes.
Yes.
So his second court action this week is he lost the lawsuit against Jimmy Kimmel over the Cameo video. So for people who don't know, Cameo is where you can go online, you hire a celebrity to record a message to you for your anniversary, your birthday, or your dog. And so Jimmy Kimmel, I love this.
Me too.
Should I let you tell her?
No, you tell
go
her.
ahead.
Yeah.
So Jimmy Kimmel, of course, set up a segment on his show, Will Santos Say It? And they would pay the $400 to give language to, because this is what you do basically. You can either give language or ask Matthew McConaughey or somebody to wish your wife a happy birthday, but they gave him things to say and he said them. And now I feel like I can't repeat one of the things that he said. Maybe.
Yes, you can. Why can't you?
Go ahead.
I mean, "Hey, Brenda," he said in one video, "I wanted to congratulate you on successfully cloning your beloved schnauzer Adolf."
Yeah.
And he did it.
Right, he did it. Took the $400.
And then he turned around and sued Jimmy Kimmel, saying that was copyrighted.
Yeah.
Right.
And Jimmy Kimmel appropriately, and his people said, "No, it's not. And we're not even thinking about you. We're just missing you." I mean, can you imagine? Really?
I didn't know. And I love that this is good for our industry, too, that the courts found that this was fair use.
Yes,
so
of course.
absolutely, Jimmy Kimmel and his broadcast could turn around, pay the $400, and then use it on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was just really.
You almost picture the judge, saying to him directly, the point of giving you the money and hiring you was to see what you would say, and you said it, and you're a politician, and their point was, you'll say anything. The fact that I assume he's not going to, he's going to stiff the lawyer, because this is a guy who doesn't have any money and is facing fines. I don't know anybody that would take his case, but some lawyer took this case. Good luck getting your money from George Santos now that you lost.
Well, maybe, as happens with former President Trump, because he has a reputation for not paying some bills, but there's a cadre of people who are friends of his who pay all of that, who pay the bills for him. But I don't think that George Santos has any friends who are willing to pay for him. So I don't know what that's going to be about anyway. It's
because when they do that, they're often investing in your future. What are you going to do for them in the future? George Santos is not doing anything for anybody in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know.
But you know what? Somehow I expect him to crop up at some point.
Oh, of
years
course he
from
is.
now on another.
He's going to be on a reality show. He's going to be on 15 reality shows.
Yeah, I can believe it. I can absolutely believe that.
He said it. He said it. Can you believe that?
Yeah.
Outrageous.
Yeah. There you go.
So, Kelly, this next story, I love Sven the penguin.
Oh, yeah.
So much.
Yeah.
So much. So tell people who Sven is and the whole history of this. And people, if this story sounds familiar, it's because Parks and Recreation did an episode based on it where Leslie Knope, performed a ceremony for two penguins. So tell people who Sven is.
Sven is a male Gen 2 penguin. I didn't even know there were different kinds of penguins because they all look the same to me. I'm sorry to say. But anyway, he had lost a partner and then was very unhappy. And they put him together with Magic, in what they call a summer meet cute in Sydney. And they bonded, came together.
And Magic is another male penguin.
Yeah. I was about to say Magic is another male penguin. So they were a, quote, queer couple. I do recall all of the blowback from a lot of people who were like, oh my God. And then somebody said, these are penguins, calm down. Anyway, they had a nice relationship, but of course the whole penguin thing is you take the egg. What was the thing that Morgan
March
Freeman?
of the Penguins.
Thank you, March of the Penguins with Morgan Freeman.
Right.
We learned how the penguins bond forever, and then they take the egg and they nurture it and blah, blah, blah. Well, they didn't have an egg, so they gave them an egg, kind of like a little penguin IVF. And then they raised this chick, and then they raised another chick. It was lovely. And then Sven just died.
Yeah, it was 11. I don't know how long penguins live, though.
I thought birds lived longer. I meant to look that up.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, and it just feels lonely.
It does. But you know what? I have to say, we read so much stuff that makes us kind of go, oh my God, I don't know if I can read another thing. This last paragraph, the loss of Sven is heartbreaking to the penguin colony, the team, and everyone who's been inspired to positively be impacted by their story. To help him mourn the loss, the Aquarian took Magic, his partner, who turns 9 this year, to see Sven after he died. He started singing, and the rest of the colony joined in.
Isn't that so? Oh my God, I know. That was really...
But, this notion that animals don't have emotional lives, of course they do.
Of course
they do.
And you know what it reminded me of? Steve Hartman, who writes beautiful pieces for CBS, did a story about 2 geese. Both of them were partnerless, and one of the owners of one of them put a note in the local paper or whatever, the regional paper, and said, I know it sounds crazy, but I'm looking for a partner for me, and hooked up with another family, and they got together. I highly recommend you seeing it. It's a beautiful story.
I love these stories. It just reminded me, I'm just going to take us off track. So I'm a runner. I run along the Charles a lot. And a couple of years ago, I don't think anybody ever wrote about this, and I should have, or at least had suggested that somebody at GBH do this. There was a whole flock of Canada geese together. There was one white, it was either duck or goose that was with them. And somehow they had allowed this white goose or duck into their little community, and I would run by them constantly, and I just loved this diversity in this little pod, this little community. They had welcomed this non-Canada goose into their community. It was just beautiful to see. It made me happy every week.
Oh, that's so sweet. That was a sweet. Anyway, this is a very, very lovely story.
It is a lovely story, and I hope we see more of those.
I know.
But I also think zoo people are really attuned to this kind of stuff, and they really go out of their way to make a lot of the animals
and they've witnessed
happy.
A lot of this kind of stuff. Yeah, so they know the
Exactly.
stories like this. I tell you, it's really great.
Here's hoping for magic.
Yeah.
Yes.
That he
Find
can
somebody
Magic
else.
for magic. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
all right. Now let's talk about our favorite company now, Jared.
Well, this is I know you love this one.
I do. So, when I first saw the headline, this is one of those ones where you read the headline and you think, oh, this could be something that's really good. And then you read the story, and as the further down you go, oh, wait a minute, this seems to be something really bad. Like I got lured in. But the headline is Google joins a $250 million deal to support newsrooms in California. So when you see Google and you see the $250 million, you think Google is doing this altruistic thing. Yeah. Tell everybody what this actually is.
Well, they're trying to sort of fend off having to really pay for all of the aggregation of stories that they get from other places. And it's a very complicated thing. But I think this, for me, is the nut graph from the Journalists Union, which says, really, it's a shakedown. It said lawmakers who had been working for months on more comprehensive proposals criticized the scope of this. This is a huge scope, a huge deal. Also, the president pro tempore of the state senate questioned the legislative support for the state's share of the deal, which would require approval as part of the annual budget process. That's annual budget process. So they're saying, hey, wait a minute. They're not really coughing up what they say they're coughing up, and it falls back on us in the end. And they're sort of still in the same position they were before, getting away with what we were trying to stop from the beginning, which is that they have not acknowledged that they're sort of sucking up information, intellectual property that really doesn't belong to them.
And ads.
Yes.
It's ads.
And ads as well.
Right.
Well, it's so predatory for an industry that is so hard hit. We see the numbers. We see the nonprofits around the country trying to rally to financially save these institutions, and then this is happening.
What I thought was interesting too is that Google said it would provide $62.5 million over 5 years, and then later in the story, it's, the folks who have analyzed this said this actually was a bargain for them in many ways.
Well,
but go ahead.
What do you think would be so a big part of this was there's going to be action against them because the newspaper articles that are written by real authors, Google was slapping ads for I think itself next to these articles. So if they had just straight up sued Google and said, you can't just put ads for free next to the articles that we write, wouldn't they have gotten more money than this deal by leaps and bounds?
It would seem so. So I'm trying to figure out, for some of the people who are working obviously in the legislature who are somehow, and I think they may have been just, boonswoggled, hornswoggled about, it's Google, and it looks like they're giving us a lot of money, as opposed to looking at the details. But as you go on through the story, then you see how it all unravels. So, I mean,
I can't even see how the state got involved in this. I don't know why it wasn't just a lawsuit by the newspapers against Google.
Exactly. Yeah, they got lobbied.
They got
lobbied, and it sounded good, and it's a big corporation, and hey, maybe, and it sounds like you're actually setting up something that could be not a role model, but a model for other towns.
Yeah.
And maybe it supports the California looking like they're forward-thinking. As we know, California is often forward-thinking about a number of items, as they're the first to do this, that, and the other. But in this case, I think somebody got really excited by the lobbying.
I still think that the journalists of the newspapers can sue them because the legislature doesn't have the right to bargain away the rights of the owner of those articles, which I think would be the newspaper outlet,
It doesn't say that wouldn't happen. This is supposed to prevent that from happening, but it doesn't say that it would.
And it doesn't sound like, based on the reaction, that it's going to prevent any of that.
Exactly. So who knows whether this thing... I just think that if you have to require approval as part of the annual budget process, that's going to get somebody's attention finally.
Yeah, I think so, too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
All right, Kelly, speaking of George Santos.
Yes.
Because our team here was so moved by our conversation, they actually dug up some sound from Jimmy Kimmel sharing one of the cameo requests.
Let's hear it.
He sent Santos, so here he asked Santos to congratulate a mother named Brenda for successful cloning of her dog.
Please congratulate my mom, Brenda, on the successful cloning of her beloved Schnauzer, Adolf.
Hey, Brenda. I wanted to congratulate you on successfully cloning your beloved Schnauzer, Adolf. I know it was a lot of trials and tribulations, but you finally did it. Now you get to enjoy Adolf and be happy. So give him a belly rub for me. Mwah.
Oh, wow.
He wasn't even aware.
No.
He did it.
No, of
That's
course he's not
amazing.
aware. If you're changing your identity every other day, how can you be aware?
Yeah.
Which one was responding?
And he
in
was
the
so
moment?
enthusiastic, too. Give your cloned Schnauzer a belly rub.
Well, I think he just wanted to go off script and sound,
You got to
personable.
sell it. You got to, especially when you're a grifter, you got to sell
When
it.
you're getting your $400. All right, back to our regularly scheduled programming, including programming on ABC. What's the big casting news?
Oh, well, this, and I do not know how to pronounce his last name. Netarozek, thank you very much. Steve Netarozek, who is everybody knows as the horse pummel guy, is going to be on Dancing with the Stars. I love this for several reasons. First of all, I love him. I love the whole Clark Kent because he can't see, so he had to take the glasses on and off. I love how enthusiastic he was about, doing his job as the pommel guy on the team, and the fact that there was a lot of, I don't know, maybe he should be on the team or not, because this is all he does. He couldn't do anything else on the team of people that could do several things, but this is his only gig. And I love the fact that he was the one that took them to the bronze medal for doing the only thing that he can do. All of that plus his, sort of appreciative personality makes me so happy. Here's the second part that I'm very happy about. I kind of got off of Dancing with the Stars. I always considered it kind of fun to watch in the background or pay attention to. I didn't do it every week. When they started putting these skeezy people on, as stars.
Sean Spicer.
Yeah, come on, So this, to me, he represents what the show was originally about. Highlighting some people that maybe rose to fame for one thing or over a period of time, but there was a lot of shall I be very Pollyanna, goodness about them.
Yeah.
And you could, really rally around their participation in this family-friendly event. The other skeezy people I did not appreciate. So this could bring me back if the rest of the contestants are not skeezy.
I had kind of forgotten that he could really only do that. So do we think he can dance?
Well, he said he wants to put some backflips and some gymnastics. And if you think about the other people, wasn't Simone Piles? Didn't Simone Piles did it?
I can't remember.
No,
I'm not
one
sure.
of the gymnasts did it.
Yeah.
And was excellent.
Yeah.
But, her criticism from them was that they didn't feel like her artistry was as broad as it could be because, when you're doing those gymnastics, handstands and this and that, you have to do a certain form. So it's hard for whomever this was, and I'm forgetting the name, to loosen up a little bit on some of the more artistic, like waltzes and stuff. Like, you don't have to be quite so
stiff, right? Right.
But, he's fun. From what I can see. I don't know him, but he seems fun.
I think he probably can dance. I think every routine, pommel horse is one of them, has a certain rhythm to it. When you saw him sitting, and he'd sit and he'd do it. He'd do the Rubik's Cube, and then he would close his eyes and he'd do the routine. He sways to it. He does it in his head. I think he's got enough rhythm that he'll get by. And I also think you think he's going to be a fan favorite. I think.
He's going to be a fan favorite. The other thing about it that often they criticize some of the amateur dancers is that they don't feel the music. Remember, he does not use his glasses, and he has low vision when he does the pommel horse. He has to feel it.
Right.
So I think he already comes with a feeling, kind of, basic foundation to really get into this. So I'm looking forward to seeing it.
And then he can bring it home to the DCU Center in Worcester.
That's
If it's still called that, I think it is.
I know. And then I want to see his girlfriend there, too. He has a girlfriend. I didn't know that. I'm so nosy and John.
What's coming up on Under the Radar?
On Under the Radar, we're doing a Martha's Vineyard Black Community linked show. So the first one is about a book co-written by one of the island's historians and by local real estate guru, Richard Taylor, about black home ownership on Martha's Vineyard, how it came to be, how some of the stuff that happened that almost prevented it happened. Some of that material has just become available in the last few years, so they wrote this really interesting book about the generational legacy of what some people understand as the summer community, but it's also year-round community as well. And the second part is a 20-year-old book that was set on the vineyard, written by Yale Law professor Stephen L. Carter. It was his first novel called Emperor of Ocean Park.
I have that book.
That's 20 years old. Can you believe it?
Is it 20 years old?
It's 20
I've had that book
years
for that
old.
long? Oh
Yes.
God.
Ocean Park is this lush, beautiful green in Oak Bluffs, Massachusetts. And he tells a really fascinating story about a wealthy black family with a home right off of Ocean Park, hence Emperor of Ocean Park. It's now been turned into a streaming series that is going gangbusters on MGM Plus. And
Nice.
Stephen, they changed some things around, and Stephen is like thrilled. He's like, this is great. I mean, even more than I could imagine. So we interviewed him and also the guy who was in charge of refitting the story or basing the story on in the streaming series on the book. So it's really
congratulations to
interesting.
him.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah.
And I will see you in about 43 minutes.
That is correct.
Thanks,
on the Culture
Kelly.
Show.
Okay, all right. Thank you all.
We've been speaking with GBH's Callie Crossley. She's host of Under the Radar with Callie Crossley Sundays on 89.7 at 6 p.m. You can also hear her Callie commentaries on Mondays for GBH's Morning Edition. And she's co-host of GBH's The Culture Show, which airs daily at 2 o'clock, live today for the Week in Review at the BPL. After a quick break, it's Michael Curry from the Mass League of Community Health Centers and the NAACP. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Judy Ewell in for Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, we'll hear how local members of the neurodivergent community are feeling about the attention focused on Gus Walls, son of Tim Walls, after this week's DNC. Early voting gets underway this weekend ahead of the September primary, and the North End is gearing up for St. Anthony's Feast. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds from utility bills, uncashed paychecks, savings accounts, and more. To see if you have unclaimed money, you can visit findmassmoney.gov. And Furniture Consignment Gallery, committed to the circular economy for over 30 years. Current inventory is available to view in their showrooms in Burlington, Natick, Hanover, and Plymouth. More at FurnitureConsignment.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Marjorie are out. I'm Jared Bowen, here with Andrea Cabral. We're joined now on Zoom by Michael Curry. He's president and CEO of the Massachusetts League of Community Health Centers. He's also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors, where he chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. Hi, Michael.
Hey, good to see you both.
Good to see you, too. So, because nothing is ever destined to go smoothly, the taking of the St. Elizabeth's Hospital by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts under eminent domain is proceeding, but not without a few glitches. Give us an update. What's going on with that?
Well, first, just that we made progress in the governor's announcement just a week ago that there's been some movement, one, on several of the hospitals being transferred to other entities. And then two entities being closed, of course, Neshoba and Kearney Hospital. And this one, St. E's being taken by eminent domain. That's progress, right? Because we've seen this sort of limbo with what was going to happen and stewards declining funds and whether the services would still be maintained at these sites and whether they'd have the money to maintain the care. So one is that just progress. And again, I say this as much as there's criticism on all sides about our not being prepared for this as a Commonwealth. The reality is I know that the governor, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, SEIU 1199, the mass nurses, and everyone's engaged in the conversation. So where we are now is, of course, some of these transactions that are due to happen are being challenged by those who are saying, one, in the eminent domain case, that 4.5 million is not enough for the property, that they should get more in value for the sale of that property. Now, keep in mind, just like if it was your own home, and there's a lot of folks who have claim on your property, once there's some transaction to give up your property, everyone sort of asserts their claim. They start to challenge that you're going to sell it for the amount that you've decided you wanted to sell it for. So that's essentially what's happening here. I believe, and I'm not a eminent domain attorney when I say this, but I've been hearing that one of the things that may happen is that the state can still move forward with the eminent domain and dispense with the property and then deal with the challenge on the amount on the other side.
Can all be very confusing, even if you've read through it. So for people, especially in Brighton and in the Boston area, who are looking at St. E's and they hear this question about eminent domain, they hear that there'll be legal challenges that could tie it up for years. What do we expect this means for the hospital in the meantime and medical services in that area?
Well, this is the challenging part, right, is that ultimately this should always be about the patient and about care. And we lose sight of that in these conversations. It becomes about profit. It becomes about property. It's the positioning, the legal positioning that happens in our process. But the bottom line is that patients who get their care at St. E's should continue to get that care, and that those communities that rely on that hospital should not be disadvantaged or made to be absent of their access to services. So the reality is this could be tied up, but I think if the process works like I believe it will, what you will see is that the transfer will happen through eminent domain, and then the state will go on for years potentially with trying to settle what the actual value is for the property.
Well, one of the biggest ironies to me is that the landlord, that's the one who's challenging the amount of the sale, the amount of money that the Commonwealth is willing to pay for St. E's, the landlord is a private equity firm, much like Stewart was a private equity firm that bankrupted the thing to begin with. So we're just sort of lurching from one private equity firm looking to their bottom line to another. Now, I don't know. I mean, this is a lot of acres of land for St. E, and I know what the value, notwithstanding, all of the other noise around this might be. But the bottom line is that it seems as though we keep finding ourselves at the mercy of what private equity wants.
Yeah, and I mean, the reality is, I'm not arguing for private equity or for profit, right? But that's what we get ourselves into, both on the steward side, being a venture-backed entity, and then on the property side now, is you get into where the driving motivation is bringing back profits for your investors, right? So if you're now going to face property that you purchased at $4.5 million, but it's valued, I think, at somewhere north of $200 million, and you're taking much less than it's worth, then of course you're going to challenge that. Of course, you're going to tie that up in court. I think the reality is to your point, we need to start thinking differently about how we invite in and how we regulate for-profit entities in the Commonwealth.
So the other big question I have is we have spent a lot of time reading about and talking with you about how the medical system has been stressed, especially coming out of COVID, and then to know that Boston Medical Center would take over management of St. E's, for example, Lawrence General would acquire a hospital in Methuen and Haverhill, and Lifespan Health System would take over St. Anne's and Fall River and Morton Hospital in Taunton. Do they have the capacity to do? We want them, all of these hospitals, to survive for all the reasons you just said, but how do we know they have the capacity to do this?
Well, I think, when you think in Lawrence and you think BMC, the reality is both hospitals, and I've talked to both CEOs, the tremendous amount of strain on our safety net providers, and I'll say our safety net hospitals as well, under reimbursement, often dealing with high rates of and acute cases of disease, chronic illnesses, under investment. And both hospitals, quite frankly, have needed this infusion of cash and resources before this Stewart crisis even came up. So the reality is that the state is going to have to determine with those hospitals what this arrangement means and how we can invest in and support them being successful going forward. When we were dealing with the Wall Street crisis in 2008, what kept coming up was these financial institutions that were too big to fail. I would argue that we have hospital systems and health centers and other healthcare institutions that serve our most vulnerable populations that are too critically important to fail. And that would include these two hospitals we're talking about, Lawrence and BMC.
So tell us again what the role of the community health centers is going to be as all of this upheaval and transition goes on. I know you want it to be as smooth as possible, and I think when we spoke last week, we talked a little bit about the role, but as this develops, where do you see this going?
There's a lot of conversations, people are ideating right now about what the role could be in terms of maybe a Kearney with a closure. It's all up in the air. I know folks at PARC talked about creating sort of a medical village at the Kearney site. And instead of it being a hospital, being a site for urgent care and other services, of course, health centers want to be plugged in on that conversation and looking at what the options are. I know in Neshoba, we have a health center in the area that does provide urgent care. So we want to be able to stand in and provide urgent care where there's a closure. We have urgent care sites. We have 22 health centers in the city of Boston. We serve 1 out of every 2 people who live in the city of Boston gets a care at a community health center. And whether that's urgent care or whether that's primary care, or the many other services we provide, we want to make sure that there's no break in services for those patients who are being treated at one of these closures or being sort of uncertain, facing an uncertain future with some of these acquisitions.
We're speaking with Michael Curry. This is kind of a surprising news recently, this spate of companies, including Jack Daniels, John Deere, Tractor Supply, and the latest is Harley Davidson, all companies that have announced that they're going to be rolling back their DEI efforts and or people and or organizations within these companies to create systems of equity and inclusion within these companies. This was a huge focus, of course, in this country after the murder of George Floyd. Why is this happening now, and who's pushing for this?
Yeah, I've said before, even on this program, I've said, I'm glad so many people are woke and others are waking up, but some of us are insomniacs. And the reality is people are starting to go back to sleep. So some don't want to be awake, right? They want to go back to a place where they don't acknowledge that we need diversity. They don't want to go back to a place where there's a recognition that women, people of color, have been denied access into institutions, into C-suites, into key positions, into wealth building. They want to pretend that that never happened. And of course, that's the political winds that are shifting in Congress. And then that's playing out post the civil rights of the affirmative action decision by the Supreme Court. People are now running away from the proclamations and promises they made after the murder of George Floyd. It's no surprise. I mean, any of us who know history, and again, I always point back to the end of slavery and Reconstruction. There's always been broken promises by this country, because at some point, once we settle in after the proclamations, folks have never really been bought in on doing the right thing. And when the political winds shift enough, they retrench, they fall back from that. So John Deere, Harley Davidson, and all the rest of these companies are doing exactly what they were waiting on the right moment to do.
Right, and it's not that sometimes you pick up a story and you hear that someone is backtracking on something like this, but it's because they're being sued, they're in litigation, and their lawyers have, you can kind of glean that their lawyers have said to them, we're not going to win this, right? These companies are abandoning their efforts just because an online conservative is pressuring them.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, that to me shows that they didn't want to do it to begin with. But that's the shame of it, is that they took a huge amount. Don't you remember them taking so much credit when they announced these initiatives, right? To get in the good graces of all the people their ads target. And now they're running from it.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is, I think, the reaction was to their staff, to their employees, to the people who buy their goods and services, who in the moments after George Floyd was demanding better of their employers or the people who manufacture, provide goods and services to them. They said, we want you to be better. We want you to reflect the diversities of the communities that we come from. But the political wind shifted. So now they're eliminating DEI positions. They're not requiring supply diversity programs. They're not tying promotions and compensation to diversity like many companies had been moving towards. This is a broken promise. But again, American history is full of broken promises when it comes to people of color, African Americans. And then I'll even mention LGBTQ+, that a lot of these companies had finally met the moment of acknowledging, as we heard in the Democratic Convention, no matter who you love, it shouldn't mean that you don't get a job, that you don't get an opportunity, that you don't get care, that you don't get services. And they're retrenching from that as well. We need to stand up to that and fight back. And last but not least, I'd say, even if it was a legal challenge, not the sort of public shaming that's happening of these companies around DEI, the reality is, I used to say to Mayor Menino, God bless his soul, Mayor Walsh, a good friend, that even when people challenge you on doing the right things, you have to accept being sued, because that's what the outcome needs to be for you to show that you're standing up for what's right.
Well, to me, speaking of the LGBTQ issues, you're watching the scale be weighed here, and you're seeing the decision-making is really transparent, because there are organizations like the Human Rights Campaign, which of course is in support of the LGBTQ+ community, that will publish lists. These are the companies across the country that are doing 100%. So companies for a while, like Harley Davidson, wanted to be on those lists because they can draw in that clientele too. This was a marketing practice. You want to be really cynical, this wasn't even about supporting LGBTQ, but this was about marketing your company and drawing in a new customer base. And now all of a sudden, they have no interest in drawing that company base in, and there's that loss of revenue.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest with you, I think you're 100% perfectly right. Depending on the outcome of this election, don't be surprised. I'll be the little futurist about it. Don't be surprised if this wind changes back, depending on if Kamala Harris wins the election, because then they'll decide that it's safe again to do this. But right now, they're running, and they're running because they were cowards anyway. They did not want to do the right thing. And I'll be bold enough to call them cowards, because doing the right thing means that you may take some losses. You may not have the revenue at the levels that you thought you would. But again, I tell people all the time, there was a time that women were denied access to institutions and people were willing to walk away with their money to keep women out of those institutions. And the bold companies said, no, we're going to do the right thing, and we'll take a loss if we have to.
Now, with private companies doing this, outside of public pressure, there's not, a whole lot that you can do to force a private company necessarily to do the right thing. But we also have this story where the state legislatures are now pushing, in certain areas, in certain states, pushing these colleges based on the SCOTUS decision and what they're able to, how they're able to sort of broaden it somewhat informally, pushing colleges to close their DEI offices. Now that is the state doing this. So tell people what's going on with them, and to the extent that you think that there are any remedies when there's a state doing it versus when it's just private pressure on a private company. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so the numbers are pretty startling. Nearly 50 schools across the country have closed diversity-focused offices or multicultural resource centers. For those of us who are people of color, who represent wide range of diversities, who went to college, I went to Macalester College in St. Paul. I knew the critical resource that a multicultural affairs played in getting me to graduate, right? Because racial isolation, because of the racial incidents on campus, representing my race in a classroom and feeling like there was the oppression of that in a classroom. It was multicultural affairs that gave us the resources to graduate, to thrive, to navigate these systems. And right now they're shutting down those offices across the country when we know that there's an underrepresentation of people of color in these colleges. So University of Missouri, being another coward example, in July disbanded their DEI offices without even being challenged on their DEI office investments. So you got this going on across the country, in Nebraska, Lincoln, Kentucky, and North Carolina, Charlotte, all looking to disband their diversity and inclusion offices. So I think the challenge to your question is really about federal and state resources. And I think when you're in a Republican state, there's really no challenge because a lot of these Republican leaders, this is the outcome they wanted. But depending, again, on the outcome of the federal election, you can tie resources to whether they're complying with diversity, equity, inclusion practices. So I tell you that I'm waiting with bated breath on November because I know the outcome that America needs. And I know an outcome that will represent true inclusion in this country. And I'm hoping that that happens in November.
Before we let you go, how are you feeling about November after what you just saw this week in Chicago?
I will tell you, and I've said this before, that this is an energy I have not felt, and people say that, but I have not felt this since 2007, 2008. There's an energy around her candidacy that I believe, one, is at the core of it is Black women that are organized, that are mobilized, that are energized by her story and her promise to change this country and to advance for all people, not just Democrats, not just for people of color. And I think that that's going to lead to a historic turnout. That's my hope. That's my belief in November. And then I think she appealed masterfully to independents, to those who are disgruntled Republicans who, as I often say, Donald Trump stole their bus and they all had their faces pressed against the window, terrified, until he started delivering on the places that they wanted to get to. But they're still terrified, but that is Donald Trump. So I think that some of them will support Kamala Harris, as we saw some Republicans speak at the Democratic Convention. I do believe that now it's about turnout. It's not about complaining anymore. It's about getting out and voting. It's about calling our auntie them and our cousin them and getting them to show up and show out and deliver a victory in November.
Well, I texted Adam Kinzinger this morning. I got to know him a little bit from his time in Boston. Commented on his speech, and he said, now it's just up to people to listen. Hopefully they did.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. It's always a pleasure.
Always. Thank you both.
Thank you.
We've been speaking with Michael Curry, President and CEO of the Mass League of Community Health Centers. He's also a member of the National NAACP Board of Directors, where he chairs the board's Advocacy and Policy Committee. After a quick break, we're opening the phone and text line. Summer's back today. Temps finally above 60, but its days are numbered. Parents might be celebrating the return to school. How are you marking the waning days of summer? Call or text next. You're listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH, live from the BPL, and streaming online at youtube.com/GBH News.
I'm Jared Bowen. Today on the Culture Show, Benifer, which had been Benefraught for months, is now Benefinished. We look at what the A-listers' decades-long roller coaster of a romance says about Hollywood, love, and us bystanders who have been invested in the Ben Affleck-Jennifer Lopez reunion. From there, we remember TV pioneer Phil Donahue, whose daytime TV talk show launched a television genre. That and more on the Culture Show's Week in Review, today at 2 on 89.7 GBH.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Bryant University, where students achieve exceptional outcomes through an integrated curriculum that combines business and liberal arts or health sciences. Learn more at bryant.edu. And Comcast, offering Xfinity Internet, designed to provide a connection for home networks so everyone can be online at once, even during peak hours. More information at xfinity.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming to youtube.com/GBH News. Jim and Marjorie are already enjoying the last vestiges of summer out on vacation. I'm Jared Bowen, here with Andrea Cabral. Well, speaking of summer, after a 10-day stretch of below average temps, we're finally getting a weekend that feels like summer as we prepare to the transition to fall. As the BPR team prepares to join Jim and Marjorie on a break, and as we count down the last carefree days of the season before back to school, with September's approaching deadlines and the sped-up political season we all live in, the phone and text lines are open at 877-301-8970 for a BPR end of summer check-in. Again, our number is 877-301-8970 to call or text. A few questions on the table. Are you a parent whose real break starts in September with the kids going back to school, and it's about time? Are you headed back to school yourself and totally panicked about getting the dorm ready and all your 3-ring binders prepped? Do they still have binders?
I don't think so.
No, probably not.
I don't think so.
They just have tablets.
The last person to have binders was Mitt Romney. All of the women in the binders.
Yeah, we remember that. And kids or no kids, how are you squeezing the last few enjoyable sunny moments of the season? The number again is 877-301-8970 to call or text. I know it's such a cliche, but it went by real fast, didn't it?
It did go by really fast. And you know, for the people who, for them it's not, oh good, my kids are going back to school so I can finally get a break. What about the people who don't have kids but are thinking to themselves, I'm not really lamenting the end of summer because I work from home most of the time, and so I'll just kind of quiet vacation, as they say. My boss won't know that I'm extending my summer, but I'll just quiet vacation. If you're a quiet vacationer, we want to hear from you too, how you found ways, you know, it helps to work at home, to extend your summer if you're not ready for it to be over yet.
So you send the kids off on the school bus. You know they're at school. Couple lunch reservations by the sea, couple glasses of wine at lunch. Right. That's your vacation. That's squeezing it in. I have talked to a couple parents this summer who said they are more than overjoyed to have the kids be going back to school again.
Jamie talked to us about this particular earworm, which we didn't cover when we were doing commercial jingles. We have some sound. People are going to absolutely remember this. And in fact, it might still be running. Here's what Staples' take on the way parents felt about kids going back to school.
It's the most wonderful time of the year. It's that time of year again. They're going back. It's back to school time at Staples. Over 7,000 supplies and guaranteed low
Okay, we can probably stop shilling for Staples now.
Right, really.
But that is a pretty great. And you remember the image of that commercial was all the parents just dancing in the air and really, really happy.
And the kids walking behind them with their heads down, like walking really slowly, like we have to go back to school.
Well, what about you, Andrea? Have you fully enjoyed the summer? Because this is the other thing. We were reading a lot about people looking at it thinking, I haven't done what I was supposed to do this summer.
I didn't know, and for some reason I didn't. I mean, I spent a considerable amount of time, here on BPR for the summer, but I didn't plan to go anywhere, which, I kind of wish I had, although I actually prefer, I'm going to go see my brother in California, in late fall. I actually prefer to travel in early and late fall versus traveling in the summer. But no, I didn't really go away.
Well, that's early summer, late fall. Well, that's because you can avoid all the families out, right?
Right.
And it's a little
Right.
less expensive to travel then. I know I was actually walking here this morning, and I was thinking that in just a few months, this is going to be frigid. There's the opportunity for snow. Yeah, so just soak up every last second of this.
Right. And you kind of, I'm not at all sure that people with climate change and the way that our seasons, sometimes we miss an entire season. I'm not sure that people are planning it as rigidly as they did when we used to have 4 discrete seasons. I think there's a lot of overlap. People wait longer, and to your point, wait to get better prices. People are really attuned to how much it costs to travel, how much it costs to go somewhere. And the weather is likely going to be hotter for longer, as we get into fall. So, summer may become just a state of mind after, a discrete period for summer may become just a state of mind.
Our number again is 877-301-8970 to call or text. Rosin Dedham says the Seaport Summer Market returns this weekend. It's an opportunity to support local small businesses, artists, and restaurants outdoors in the Seaport. The last chance until Snowport this holiday.
Yeah.
Seaport sounds better than Snowport.
We do have, if you are staying at home, and to Roz's point, we have a lot of really great stuff you can do here. We advertise everything that's free, the festivals, the art, the music, all of the stuff. There's plenty of stuff. We really do concentrate on making. We have a lot of tourists that come in every single year, but even for the folks who live here, there's a lot of good stuff to do that doesn't require you to get on a plane.
And to remind people who were listening to Oompa this morning, there's that festival, music festival,
Absolutely.
Free music festival happening in downtown Crossing tomorrow. Let's go to Michelle calling from Somerset. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle.
Hello, how are you?
Good.
Great, thank you.
So I'm calling because I ran a home daycare for 25 years, and I had 3 boys. And I always was very sad when school started again. I enjoyed having my boys. I enjoyed, the adventures that we could do all summer long. So, yes, I was always sad that my boys had to go back to school.
How old are they now?
Oh, my God. They're 37, 32, and 31.
Do they have the fond memories of being with you in the summertime?
Yes. Matter of fact, my older son was just saying how he missed going to the Whalen Museum in New Bedford, because that was always one of the things we did.
That's sweet. That's really nice.
That is great. And then you go home and you have the slip and slide. If they're that age, there was remember the slip and slide?
Oh, yeah.
You put it on the front lawn and then
definitely.
You do a couple of slides and then you slam into something and end up in the hospital after that.
Michelle, are you a grandmom now? So are they experiencing things with their kids the way they experienced with you?
Well, technically, I'm a grandmother, but they all have 4 legs.
Oh. A woman after my own heart. That's good enough for me.
New Bedford is great, by the way. The Whaling Museum is fantastic.
Yeah.
And then just walking around those cobblestone streets, and they've got a great art programming that happens now. The Rooster that I talked about earlier this summer is there, and it's a short walk from the seaport down there up into historic New Bedford. Lots of great restaurants and bakeries and great reasons to be outside.
New Bedford as a city was really intentional starting several years ago about revitalizing their city, the look of it, the kinds of businesses that they wanted to attract. I mean, New Bedford has these cobblestone streets in the heart of the city.
That Herman Melville was walking on himself?
Yeah, I mean, they really have done an excellent job in New Bedford. I know because we ended up, when I was with Ascend, we cited a cannabis company there, but they're, this really becoming a much more welcoming city and really sort of growing their revenue base with all of the businesses that they have. They've done a really good job.
We have an anonymous texter saying, "Sorry, gang, I'm ready for spooky season. We take our vacation in October in the White Mountains. It's wonderful, so quiet and relaxing."
Let's go to Linda in New Hampshire. Hi, Linda.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Andrea and Jared. Love you guys. Love BPR. I just got back from the convention in Chicago. Chicago was fabulous. And Michelle, of course, and Barack brought down the house. Most exciting time of my life. I was actually scheduled to speak, but we got bumped. James Taylor and I got bumped.
I was going to say, yeah, you're in good company.
Yeah, exactly. But I wouldn't have missed it for the world because, again, I'm a public official here, so I'm running for re-election, and to get to bring that kind of energy back into the campaign has just been fabulous. It's just, we're so excited, and it's going to be a campaign season like no other.
So a very, very good summer and a very good season for you. Thank you so much for calling,
She's
and good
back,
luck with your campaign.
And she is ready. Andy from Lowell texts us, no kids, but a college professor going back in just under 2 weeks. Definitely not ready. But my August has been so much better than my June or July, given the political ground shifting under our feet. I've been so much more relaxed over this last month, despite my dread about school starting.
Meanwhile, Aiden from our team here would like to extend sympathies to any teenagers out there trying to cram 2.5 months of summer reading into the next week and a half. He says from personal experience, it gets better. I forgot about that. I forgot about summer reading.
And everybody waits until the very, 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 very last minute.
And A Tale of Two Cities is very, very, very long.
Yeah. This is not the time to be starting War and Peace and thinking you're going to get it done before you have to go back to school.
Sorry, kids.
One of our anonymous texters says, good riddance summer and AC. Welcome open shades and windows. Welcome my sweaters and cider donuts. The last week has been great. Hello and welcome to no bugs. And then they go on about dogs on the beaches and various other things, so the things that they'll miss and the things that they won't. But at the end of the day, their view is good riddance to summer.
Well, summer cider donuts, that is a good reason to...
Yeah, but not pumpkin spice, because come on.
I can't even say the words.
I know, come on.
All right, let's go to Jennifer in Providence. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, how are you? I listen to your radio all the time, love it. I'm here in Providence. I'm single, no cats, but I am enjoying the transition so much because I go for a walk late morning. I'm getting to know neighbors. I'm getting to know people I haven't met in my neighborhood. We are a very multicultural, multi-ethnic neighborhood here. It's wonderful. And something that Kamala Harris said last night about love beyond the boundaries of families very much resonates when we go and take a walk. We get to know our neighbors. We have conversations. We stop time. And so that's my transition story.
That's lovely.
This is turning into a really beautiful segment.
It is. And people finding, peace in the transition or feeling encouraged by whatever's going on around them. And sort of, I like this sort of, stress is leaving me. I'm de-stressing and I'm feeling good about it. So that's good. Congratulations, Jennifer.
Thank you, Jennifer, calling from Providence. By the way, that's a great thing to do. I think it's always kind of folly to go too far in New England in the summer because we have such great beauty here. We have the lakes, we have the ocean, we have the mountains. Everything is so close. And we have these great cities. A couple of years ago, during the summer, I went down to Providence because I realized I'd never spent a lot of time just walking around.
It's
That's
lovely.
a beautiful city.
It really is.
We're very fortunate to live here.
Giuliano in Worcester says, my partner and I are really looking forward to going to Provincetown in September. It's a favorite time of year, a bit less busy, but lots to do and plenty of great beach weather. So they're still summer mode.
Yeah, and of course, summer goes well into September.
Yes.
We know that, as you're pointing out, for better and for worse.
Yes, it does.
Let's go to Cassie in Plainville. Hi, Cassie.
Hi, Cassie.
Hi there. I just wanted to remind everyone, the public libraries have all the library passes. You can go to so many wonderful places for really cheap and sometimes for free.
Oh, that's great.
It's a great program that, so many communities, they tie in their arts organizations and many cultural organizations with their library passes. That's a great idea.
I'd like to know whether or not people... Thank you for your call, Cassie, whether people are taking advantage of that kind of stuff as well. I mean, that's among the free things, right?
Well, I know, because I just had Jamie Wyeth on the show yesterday, the artist Jamie Wyeth up at the Farnsworth Museum in Rockland, Maine. They just, we have applause for Jamie Wyeth.
Yes.
I echo your applause. The Farnsworth Museum in Rockland, Maine, which has had this Jamie Wyeth show up this summer, has just extended it because it's been so popular.
That's wonderful.
Of course, Rockland, Maine, Rockport, Maine, that whole area, Camden, that's another beautiful place to go during the summertime, and it's a fairly short drive.
Jenny from Long Island.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi. How are you?
Good.
Good to hear you both.
Thanks for calling.
Every time this topic comes up, I always get very excited. I absolutely dreaded my kids going back to school. I have 4 kids. They're in their 40s and 30s now. We loved summer, and now my kids have kids, and my daughters are going through the same thing. They dread the kids going back to school.
Oh, well, that's
So,
nice
Oh,
to
they
hear.
miss them, yeah. Well, so you're not in that category of people that were singing and dancing and couldn't wait to get your kids' school supplies and push them out.
Absolutely not. The minute it begins, all the stuff about school supplies and all the regimented routines, I hate it. My daughter hates it. I loved having them home.
Oh, well, now you can see, your grandkids, so now your kids have kids. So are you doing the grandmom thing?
Well, my daughters, I live on Island. My daughters live in Baltimore. The kids actually start school on Monday. So that didn't work.
Well, they'll come see you on vacations. They'll come up to New York and see you on vacation.
I'll get down there and vice versa. But I empathize with them. It's hard.
Oh,
Well,
it's
thank
sweet
you
that you missed
so much
them.
for the call, Jenny. Yeah.
Thanks, Jenny.
Those kids are lucky to have you.
So Donna's on the road. She says, I'm looking forward to the end of summer because she, quote unquote, she loves fall most of all.
Yeah, I have to say,
that's my favorite season too.
It used to be mine, but now it's spring because I think I've just gotten so tired of winters here that I love spring. Even though fall is fun to bring out the chunky sweaters and have the cider donuts
And the leaves
fireplace
and the crispness in the air. It's great. It's great. Fall's always been my favorite season.
Yeah, well, we've bonded now. I split with you just to go to spring.
We got a couple of minutes left. We have time for Laurel and Natick.
Okay.
Laurel?
You'll be our last call.
We only have a
Hi.
couple of minutes, but how are you?
Okay. I am well. Today's weather is like summer used to be. So I look forward to September as summer because the current summers are so hot and humid that I feel like I can't go out. But I wanted to also say, this is a follow-up on the Crane Beach. Jim has gone. The pass system there works very well. And I just want to put a plug in for them changing it enough that right now you have to go online on Mondays and Thursdays at noon to book a place to go to a ticket to go to Crane Beach. There are no spontaneous people allowed, and I was there last week, and about a third of the parking lot was empty.
Thank you. Laurel, thank you for letting folks know that. So Laurel's giving us a heads up on when to get those Crane Beach passes.
We appreciate it.
Jared, what's coming up on The Culture Show?
Well, it's our weekend review, and we are going to be talking about the Bennifer breakup. We're going to be talking about the legacy of Phil Donahue and how we're about to launch into New Edition big time here in the city of Boston.
That's much anticipated. All right, well, that does it for us. Thank you for listening to another edition of Boston Public Radio, and thanks to everyone who came down to see the show at BPL. Thank you, audience.
Thank you.
Keep up with BPR 24/7 by way of our podcast, and check out our TikTok page at Boston Public Radio. Tune in Monday to hear conversations with BU researcher and Professor Joan Donovan, Diane Foley, the mother of New Hampshire journalist James Foley, who was killed by ISIS a decade ago, together with Charlie Sennett, plus folk singer Tom Rush, Joanna Lydgate from the United States Democracy Center will be here, New York Times journalist and author Nick Kristof, plus BC historian Heather Cox Richardson, and Boston-based singer-songwriters Cliff Notez and Stephanie McKay. Our wonderful crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Connolly, Nicole Garcia, and Hannah Loss. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker, and our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. Special thanks to our BPL crew, Bradley Lewis, Patrick Lally, Kevin Pace Jr., and Juan Jose Cadena. Thanks, too, to our hosts at the Newsfeed Cafe and across the street at the Lennox Hotel. Stay tuned for the Culture Show's Week in Review starting right after the 2 o'clock news here on 89.7 GBH. And live from the BPL, I'm Andrea Cabral.
I'm Jared Bowen.
It's been great to do the show with you the
Likewise.
past couple of days. Thank you all.
What's trending? What's interesting? What's going on around town? We're talking all things arts and culture on The Culture Show, next on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And Boston South Visual Art Trail, including Attleboro Arts Museum, the Art Complex Museum in Duxbury, Fullercraft Museum in Brockton, Plymouth Center for the Arts, and South Shore Art Center, Cohasset. BostonSouthVisualArtTrail.org. In 2012, Barbra Streisand made an emotional return to the stage in her native New York. Grammy-winning trumpeter Chris Bodie was there, and we have tickets to his upcoming Boston concert. Watch Barbra Streisand Back to Brooklyn tonight at 9 on GBH 44.
GBH Sustainers, we can't thank you enough for your ongoing support. And if you've received a new credit card in the mail recently, we've made it easy to ensure your sustaining membership is on track. It just takes 2 minutes. Just visit gbh.org/update and fill in your updated info to ensure you're continuing to keep quality local news and journalism on the air in Boston. That's gbh.org/update, and thanks again for your support.
I'm Associate Digital Producer Elena Eberwine, and you and I are listening to 89.7 WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. GBH News with NPR. What matters to you?
I'm Jared Bowen. Coming up on The Culture Show, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review. First up, after months of speculation about divorce, Bennifer is over again. The highly publicized roller coaster of a romance that spanned decades has its own Wikipedia entry. There are numerous analyses breaking down their breakups, legal experts weighing in on the potential financial fallout. So what is our fascination with the on-again, off-again relationship between Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez say about fame, fortune, and us? Then we reflect on the legacy of Phil Donahue, a pioneer of TV talk who paved the way for Jerry Springer and Oprah Winfrey, using the format of live audience participation to tackle what were then taboo topics for daytime TV, like sexual assault, AIDS, and race relations. That's next on The Culture Show.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. International mediators will pick up ceasefire talks in Cairo this weekend as they try to push Hamas and Israel closer to reaching a deal. This comes after President Biden spoke to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu this week to convey the urgency of reaching an agreement. NPR's Hadil Al-Shalchi has the latest.
CIA Director Bill Burns and U.S. Envoy Brett McGurk are in Cairo this weekend for yet another effort to reach a deal to eventually end the war in Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office also confirmed that the heads of Israel's Internal Security Service and the Mossad will be in attendance. Hamas has insisted that it will not participate in the talks, calling on Israel to accept an earlier deal reached last month. It is unclear if Qatar, which will be at the talks, will represent the militant group. While the U.S. has tried to convey optimism, Hamas and Israel have downplayed a deal as close. Both sides continue to blame each other for stalling. Hadil Al-Shalchi, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
The Federal Reserve signaling an interest rate cut may be coming next month.
The time has come for policy to adjust. The direction of travel is clear, and the timing and pace of rate cuts will depend on incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks.
Fed Chair Jerome Powell speaking today at a closely watched economic conference that happens every year in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. A reduction in interest rates translates into relief for borrowers, including anyone carrying hefty credit card debt. The central bank will announce its decision on rates after its policymaking meeting September 17th and 18th. Inflation and jobs remain top of mind among voters. Former President Donald Trump is bringing his no tax on tips message to Las Vegas, Nevada. He later returns to Arizona, where he's been doubling down his attacks on his rival's record on immigration enforcement. Vice President Kamala Harris used her primetime speech on the final night of the Democratic Convention to prosecute the case against former President Trump. NPR's Deirdre Walsh reports on Harris's effort to lay out a contrast.
Harris recounted her upbringing in a middle-class neighborhood. She highlighted her background as a prosecutor who followed a motto from her mother to do something to address injustices. The vice president vowed she would move past the partisan fights and provide a new way forward for the country.
I know there are people of various political views watching tonight, and I want you to know I promise to be a president for all Americans.
Harris called Trump an unserious man who would pose serious consequences for democracy, reproductive rights, and cut popular domestic programs. The end of the convention shifts to a 73-day sprint to the November 5th election. Deirdre Walsh, NPR News, Chicago. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is now up 338 points, or more than 0.75%. This is NPR News.
And from the GBH Radio Newsroom in Boston, I'm Judy Ewell. A local group that advocates for MBTA riders says late and crowded shuttle buses are earning the ire of passengers. That's as Red Line service is suspended between Kendall, MIT, and JFK UMass for track work. Jared Johnson, Executive Director of Transit Matters, says they're hearing passengers' concerns.
People have talked about just the length of time that it takes, how long some of the queues are, and, some of the circuitous routes to get to where they're going. So you definitely heard those complaints, and again, they feel valid.
Johnson says adding more shuttle buses and making people aware of MBTA bus routes and the commuter rail schedule could help. Work stopped briefly overnight on that section of track after an accident involving track maintenance vehicles along the Longfellow Bridge. It resumed this morning, and Red Line service between those stations is now set to resume on Tuesday instead of Monday morning. When Gus Walls cheered on his dad as he accepted the nomination for vice president at this week's DNC, the wholesome moment captured many hearts. But for local families with kids who are neurodivergent, it had a deeper meaning. Melrose resident Noreen Donovan is a psychologist who works with neurodivergent people like Gus, who has a nonverbal learning disorder as well as ADHD and anxiety. Besides her work, Donovan also has a son with autism. She says she and her husband were brought to tears by the moment.
For us to see Gus being able to really share his authentic self without worrying, right? Like there's no worrying about what's going on behind him, who's maybe judging him, right? There isn't any of that, and it's really refreshing.
That's psychologist Noreen Donovan. 80 degrees, sunny in Boston.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
Support for GBH comes from you.
And the American Repertory Theater, presenting Romeo and Juliet, a bold new staging of Shakespeare's iconic love story, directed by Tony Award winner Diane Paulus, opens August 31st. Tickets and more at amrep.org. And Comcast Business, committed to providing connectivity for your business with network and cybersecurity solutions. Comcast Business, powering possibilities. Restrictions apply. To learn more, you can call or visit comcastbusiness.com.
Welcome to the Culture Show, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm Jared Bowen, joined by co-hosts Callie Crossley and James Bennett II. It's our Arts and Culture Week in Review. Here's what it sounded like.
Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck. After months of speculation, the pair are calling it quits. The singer filing for divorce after 2 years of marriage, exactly 2 years of marriage.
It was easy for viewers to spot the silver mane of hair dashing through the aisles, his microphone like a baton that just had to be shared. The audience was central.
Is the caller there?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
To the show that bore Phil Donahue's name.
Homicide is back, and the best new series of 93 is even better. With better emotional stories. I want the truth to come out as much as you do. And the best guest star of the new year, Robin Williams.
Someone murdered your wife. You'd remember all the faces, wouldn't you?
It's the show you've got to watch.
Joining us, comedian and host of the upcoming CNN comedy series, Have I Got News for You? Roy Wood Jr. Oh, does it come with a wink, too? Is that part of the show?
Maybe. We'll see. I'm working on my charisma.
You're Riz.
Yeah.
It's Riz. I know. What are you talking about? With the skibbity?
Okay, I'm old. Well,
Okay.
I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out what demure means.
Very demure, very mindful. Let's not forget to be demure divas.
Well, as you just heard, Bennifer, the sequel is over. Months after divorce rumors began circulating, Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez are calling it quits. For all you New Edition fans, the city of Boston has you covered. It's rolling out events to honor the R&B group's 40th anniversary. From there, we remember talk show TV talk show pioneer Phil Donahue, who took on taboo topics and forever changed daytime television. Plus, the acclaimed TV show Homicide: Life on the Streets is finally making its streaming debut on Peacock. CNN is hitting the headlines with humor by way of a new comedy show. And are you demure? A TikTok influencer has turned demure into the latest buzzy conversation. But we will start with the demise, part 2 of Bennifer. Of course, even more local interest here in Boston because of Ben Affleck. This is something either we knew it was coming for 20 years or we at least knew it was coming over the last few months. Callie, what do you make of all of the attention that this has been given?
Oh, this is so much pop culture. This is a pop culture event. People have been following both of them independently, and of course, their relationship forever. And so to see it finally end this way, I feel bad for them because I actually thought this second go round something was going to happen. Now, having said that, and having no information and no psychologist degree, I'll just say I think it's his fault. But okay, it's really something that even people that didn't like her. Remember, we had a segment earlier a couple months ago about. For some reason, people were turning on Jennifer Lopez. She's so mean. She's so this. She's so that.
Right around the time that she had to cancel the tour, and we weren't sure what was going on. Yes.
I think some of this was the underpinning of that, and people were, thinking that they were about to break up. But anyway, as we learned, she filed April 26th to say they were separated. So this has been going on longer than many of us thought.
And then the divorce she filed on their second anniversary, which is telling. James, before we get to you, here's a little bit from the documentary, The Greatest Love Story Never Told, which is accompanied by Jennifer Lopez's musical film, This Is Me Now. This is what Ben Affleck had to say about his wife's relationship with fame.
Jen felt emotionally neglected as a child. We're kind of learning more and more. It doesn't have to be like sort of the kind of trauma where you're locked in a basement for a year to leave wounds on you. In fact, they're deceptive when they're harder to pin down. It's a hard thing to look at somebody whose professional life is wildly successful and who, on Instagram looks like they're living the happiest life in the world. The thing you discover, like you do with alcohol, is that there isn't enough alcohol in all the liquor stores in the world to fill up that thing. And in Jennifer's case, I don't think there's enough followers or movies or records or any of that stuff to still that part of you that still feels a longing and a pain.
Yeah, there's a lot to analyze there, isn't there?
Yeah, that's pretty deep and pretty rough, especially the very clear, left turn that Affleck is taking into his own very vocal and very open relationship and struggle with substance use disorder. But, the thing that I'm thinking about with this, as someone who, isn't someone that would say they really up on the goings on of super couples. This is a bit of a vestige of a simpler time. I was reading a Vanity Fair profile on Jennifer Lopez, I think from 2011, and the author of that profile pointed out that Bennifer, kind of combining those two names, that's the first time really in popular media that had happened. And what is this if not an explosion? A supernova, right? Is the death of a star. And this is a second supernova. We're seeing the same star kind of explode again. But yeah, it's just, it feels almost strangely nostalgic. And I feel bad for that.
Well, see, and this is really interesting that you say that. And my historical context is I just recently watched Elizabeth Taylor, The Lost Tapes on HBO, which is a documentary that's airing. It was just released and is streaming, and it's built around interviews that were done as part of what was supposed to be a book. And she was very candid at age 32. And we were reminded in this documentary, which marries these hours of audio tapes to her films, to home movies and photographs, of the the Elizabeth Taylor, Richard Burton romance.
That's right.
And the furor that was around that. That was epic celebrity. That essentially gave birth to paparazzi. They were hounded. And then, of course, just like Jennifer and Ben, they broke up, then they came back together, so it fueled it even more. In both cases, I think there were diamonds or jewels for Ben, to Jennifer, Richard, to Elizabeth. So it's interesting to have that historical prism and know that people were just as ravenous for information and so invested in this relationship. I mean, I have to say, just as an aside, I had hope for it because I know so many people who've gone back to high school reunions as divorced people and found reacquainted loves and former boyfriends or girlfriends and gotten back together, and those relationships last because you've lived your life and you can move on and set sail. But apparently, as I think we had insight from that documentary, there were problems there.
Yeah, but you know what else, though? The thing to think about as a consumer of pop culture, right, is like, how does this impact their output as like artists and creatives? Like, I was thinking about how when they broke up the first time, Jennifer Lopez's career was kind of in a slide for a little bit.
But it went up right after that.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You know, a couple rom-coms that were like, and then what was it, Rebirth, and then she had her first album in Spanish, and these albums weren't really well received, and then she did the American Idol, hosting gig where she replaced Simon Cowell. And so, as you pointed out, Callie, people were seeming to not be fans of J-Lo for a minute a couple months ago. So now I'm wondering, like, we learned from the past, this happened again, maybe she'll skip this phase of just kind of like a downturn and do something like really, really cool.
Well, maybe. I mean, you tend to throw yourself into your work if you have an emotional crisis, and I would say it's both. I mean, what gets me is that there's a photograph of her, I guess on their anniversary recently, where she's leaving the house that he bought after they sold the house or were in the process of selling the one that they bought together. And just the expression on her face was so sad and poignant. Nobody, of course, knew at that time. It just had now I look at it and I think to myself, that was probably the final signing of the papers or whatever, and she's leading. And their kids, by the way, have gotten together and gotten close. So, from none of my business, I don't know what really happened. I don't know these two people. They each have some issues. It's kind of sad still.
Maybe we'll get another Super Bowl out of it. Who knows?
Well, we'll see. Well, on to a better local story with local ties, and that is next. These will be the sounds of the city in early September as Boston goes all in on New Edition. There was a really exciting announcement that came out of the city of Boston this week, which is that it will be celebrating 40 years of New Edition with a mural, by having New Edition Day, by having a big concert on City Hall. I don't think it's going to be a full New Edition concert, but we are going to see New Edition headline along with a bunch of artists from the city's mixtape. And so this is a great celebration. Again, this is a reflection of the city of Boston putting arts at the center, and this is the city of Boston owning its musical roots here.
So if it isn't love, why do I feel this way? I have to say, it's that, Boston recognizing local artists and certainly an iconic group like New Edition, but it's New Edition finding new fans in this moment. Let me remind you that they did a Las Vegas residency earlier this year, supposed to be 4 days. It was so poppin', as they say, they had to add 6 more shows. And if you look at some of those videos, the dance moves have gotten better. Some of the arrangements of the old songs that we already know, right off the video. So the energy is there. And it's great to see, as John Borders IV, who is the head of tourism for Boston, said, we give them their flowers right now.
You know what? They're a bit older now. They've grown up and they've matured, which also might mean that as those moves have stayed sharp, that drama has dulled as well. That's true. And I say that because there was an article in Boston Magazine, and this came out in 2018, and I had thought about this when I saw this announcement, and it was asking this question 6 years ago: why hasn't Boston been giving New Edition, their due? And there's a couple of, reasons that were kind of poked at, and one of them had to kind of do with that internecine, drama that, brother against brother on the stage, Bobby Brown being Bobby Brown.
Bobby Brown.
Bobby Brown being Bobby Brown. And what that led to, right, is, they break up. I mean, Bobby Brown does the solo career, then Belle Biv DeVoe go off and do their own thing, and Tristan does as well. And there's that question of if they had stayed together, would they have had that same kind of, local recognition, hype, energy, love that, like, let's be real, like New Kids on the Block, often got and still does get, and they're like band cousins because they were both brainchildren, right, of Maurice Starr. So yeah.
Well, let's return to a little bit of New Edition before we talk a little bit more. Here's a bit of, again, who the city is celebrating. Cool It Now from their 1984 self-titled album. And to read about this backstory, which is going to be shared even more and more, especially as we launch into this event, which, by the way, is coming right up. It's happening.
Right.
I think kicks off the 6th of September.
The 6th and 7th. You're right.
There's a whole several days of celebration. Again, this mural, the concert, and the New Edition Day. But these, I was going to say these boys, but obviously we're talking about 40 years later. They're full-grown men now, and they're talking about how, yes, they came together, and then the record label wanted to erase the Boston from them because they wanted them to be this international group that didn't have to come from any specific place, to make them more universal and palatable to audiences, again, all over the world. But they kept those Boston ties, and they also were able to draw attention to issues in this city too that made them social activists, of course, of their time. So they deliberately didn't lose the Boston, which is nice, and all the more reason we should have them back and be celebrating them in the way that we're going to.
I would also point out that the Globe's piece notes that this is an inaugural homemade concert. So does that mean that every year they'll do something? No one has explained that. That sort of just got passed over.
And I think that the mayor's office has been making really good use of the City Hall Plaza space, and other mayor's offices have too, but I think they're looking at this very intentionally, and we've seen other arts events and concerts happen there. Remember, Boston Calling started there, so this is a way to continue that.
Yeah. Another thing that I was thinking about too with all of this is the joy that might come being present kind of like in this space. And again, we kind of come back to the theme of like almost like a time capsule, because the thing about New Edition is, after those early albums from, 82, 84, and I guess they formed in 78, right? They're so tied in a way to that vibe of New Jack Swing. It's like this blip in like popular music memory and aesthetic that we just don't really have anymore. Granted, a lot of it, I guess, has been subsumed into like what pop music is now, but being able to go back and revisit some of that, vibe is going to be, truly something. And that's a local vibe too.
That is a local vibe.
Well, again, it'll all kick off that first week of September. Well, coming up, we heard a lot this week, including from the woman herself. Without Phil Donahue, there would not have been an Oprah Winfrey or so many others who followed in his path. We remember the daytime TV pioneer. That's next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's arts and culture programming.
Newport, Rhode Island, post-Civil War.
That was a time when photography was finally becoming affordable.
And for people of African descent, it offered something uniquely special.
It was the opportunity to show themselves as they saw themselves versus what they were seeing in the media. Photography allowed them to say, no, this is who I am.
It's the Gilded Age in color, showcasing the rich history that was Black Newport.
We've been here for a while.
I'm James Bennett II. Find this story at gbhnews.org.
Funding for our programs comes from you.
And Subaru of New England. You can drive away in the all-wheel drive 2025 Subaru Forester. You can find your Subaru retailer at subaruofnewengland.com. And Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, an exhibition featuring over 700 artifacts from the Holocaust, closing September 15th at the Castle at Park Plaza in Boston. More at theauschwitzexhibition.com.
I'm Judy Ewell in for Arun Roth. Coming up on GBH's All Things Considered, we'll hear how local members of the neurodivergent community are feeling about the attention focused on Gus Walls, son of Tim Walls, after this week's DNC. Early voting gets underway this weekend ahead of the September primary, and the North End is gearing up for St. Anthony's Feast. Those stories and all the day's news starting at 4 on GBH's All Things Considered.
This is The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, here with co-hosts Callie Crossley and James Bennett II. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes Phil Donahue, who completely transformed daytime television, creating a new genre and generation of TV personalities along the way. I gave thought to that, actually, that line, as we were writing it. Did he completely transform? And the answer is yes. This is a man who, and we're talking about him because he died at age 88 this past Sunday. But this is a man who, starting in the 1960s, late 60s, carrying over from his television show, launched this, his radio show rather, launched this television show in Ohio. And what I came to realize this week is he listened. He listened to the female producers around him. He listened to what people were telling him. And he had this whole education about life while on the air, because he was the first to have these single topic issue shows about the Ku Klux Klan, about atheism, which was his first show, about abortion, about racism, about gay rights, and just homosexuality in general. And because he would spend an hour listening to what questions people were asking by literally being side by side by his guests year after year after year, he created these really compelling shows because he wasn't the only one who was listening. There was a whole audience at home that was listening, and a whole audience that was galvanized about their exposure to parts of this country and people in this country that they hadn't had access to before.
In a very frank conversation. I mean, he pioneered the frank conversation. We used to gloss over a lot of stuff, and he brought that to the fore. There's a couple things that struck me. First of all, I was shocked. This is information I got as I was researching for this. He taped 5 episodes in the Soviet Union in 1987. In 1990, he was the first to interview Nelson Mandela via satellite. Who knew this? I
read that Mandela he specifically sought out Donahue to interview him.
This is what I'm saying. I mean, and they hosted a televised debate between Democratic presidential contenders Bill Clinton and Jerry Brown Jr. This is all path-breaking stuff. Nobody was doing this. So we have to say that. The other thing that really struck me, I'm looking at where the family and the estate has asked to send donations if you want to. And one of them was Notre Dame, which surprised me. Why? I didn't know he was such a lapsed Catholic and that he was going against all of the doctrine that he had been brought up with to talk about a lot of these issues, including about the sexism and the problems in the Catholic Church. I mean, the man was like so far ahead of his time.
You know, I want to bridge 2 things that you both said. One being, Mandela finding Donahue to be interviewed, and also that Democratic primary debate, which I think about a lot because I think obviously that's how debates should be run, right? And the reason I say that is because the thing that really fascinates me watching old Donahue clips, obviously I don't think we can go and watch all 6,000 episodes. I don't know if there's a streaming library for it, but it's so intentionally matte and beige. And you can almost see the volume levels just straight across. And what that does is it really lets the personalities of those people kind of shine. You see that spark fly against the blank. And so shortly after that Mandela interview, he interviewed Louis Farrakhan, right? In an audience full of, white people. And you can kind of see kind of the simmering kind of tension and confusion, and it's just a fascinating kind of almost aesthetic kind of quality to what's happening. But yeah, like you were saying, Jared, it's the idea of listening and letting kind of the guests really be the thing you're there to see. You're not really hyping up the drama.
Well, let's take a little bit of a listen to Phil Donahue and talk more about him on the other side. In 1982, he was examining the AIDS crisis with AIDS awareness advocate, playwright, and founder of ACT UP, Larry Kramer.
When the gay community has a problem, it does not get immediate, enthusiastic establishment support for whatever might ail it. We do live in a homophobic nation, and they are further impeded, I think, in the effort to find out what's killing their friends
we're 2 years into this illness now, and I'd venture to say that most of your audience still hasn't heard about it. I have 17 friends who have died, but the total cases is now over 700 cases, almost 300 dead. The country hasn't known about it. It's hard getting media attention about it. It's hard getting the New York Times to write about it. It's hard getting the government to finance any research into it. A rare cancer is occurring.
That is mind-blowing to think about, his having that conversation and breaking ground in doing so. I wanted to also point out something you talked about, in enlivening and energizing the guests. But one of the guests were his audience members. He pioneered going to the audience. He said, actually, accidentally. He went out into the audience just one day because he felt it, and then there he was, and that became a part of the discussion, that immersive experience that we just now assume everybody does and did, but that he started it.
And he was, what was significant is he realized the power that he had, but he used it for good, basically. First of all, he was very modest about this in later years. He just said, we were just doing things to get it on the air, and he seemed legitimately curious about, okay, so this cancer, quote unquote, as it was called then, let's explore this. But he knew the power he had because he was a daily show going into people's living rooms every single day, so he knew he had a direct access. So he knew people, whatever he was going to bring in, as uncomfortable as it may be labeled in the press, again, why talk about this cancer, quote unquote, he could do it, and he could do it in such a way with the audience questions as the surrogate audience for the rest of the United States, even though they were in the studio, that would be really, really compelling. The irony here is how he became basically the architect of his own failure. If you can argue the failure after 6,000 episodes and many, many decades of television, but because of what he spawned. Yes, on the upper echelon, he spawned Oprah Winfrey, and she has been, and even this week was the first to say that she couldn't have done this without him, but also it was the Jerry Springers and the Morton Downey Jr.'s and the Sally Jesse Raphaels, people who saw what he was doing and ran with it, and then where he may have been controversial at one point when you land with Jerry Springer and people throwing chairs, it had just gone beyond anything that Phil Donahue would ever do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and thinking about the longevity of that as well, I just had this thought, but, Donahue he was like such a champion of the First Amendment and of free speech. And free speech as a concept, right, has been so politicized right now. There's this idea that we shouldn't be talking, on television, in public, about issues like gay rights or anti-trans violence.
Or Black history.
Or Black history, hip-hop, I don't know. I mean, remember Uncle Luke, Live Crew, or, and so it is interesting to see how, this is what those discussions can look like when free speech is actually working. Just kind of, shit the smoke and mirrors, right, of, saying what it is. So.
And we'll just leave with this last little bit. This is for you, Callie. In 1977, one of his guests was the actor Marlo Thomas, who appeared on Donahue, and it was love at first sight.
I'm sorry that we are out of time. You are really fascinating. And
but you are wonderful. I said it when we were off there, and I want to say you are loving and generous, and you like women, and it's a pleasure. And whoever is the woman in your life is very lucky.
Well, thank you very much.
How did that turn out, Callie?
It turned out for a 44-year marriage. I'm so happy you brought it up. I was about to bring it up myself because he married a real partner. Marlo Thomas, then and now, was a person that was also being innovative. Her sitcom, That Girl, was about a single woman at that time, it was unheard of, who had a boyfriend and was not interested in getting married.
Shocking.
It's shocking. And so they were so compatible around these issues. The other place that they asked people to send donations if they so desire is St. Jude. As you know, her dad established that charity at St. Jude, and they were big supporters all of his life and hers. So I love the partnership of the two of them, and I appreciated her note that she sent out after he died, saying she just needed a minute to just step away because she lost her sweetheart.
Well, our condolences to their family. What a legacy. Well, speaking of television that paved the way, Homicide: Life on the Streets, which arguably launched an era of prestige TV, is finally streaming on Peacock. People have been craving this because I think they do recognize that this was the foundation for so much of the television we see today. It changed the police drama. It gave us a new way of finding ourselves into characters and into nightly shows, network shows. This was held up for years because of streaming rights. People may not realize there's a lot of wrangling that has to happen when you go back to shows that we loved a long time ago for the music they used. We have to get the rights. We even deal with this at GBH. But Homicide is now back, and there's this great discussion happening about what it represents and the path it blazed.
I'm sure the two of you will talk about, having watched it intensely and the acting. I want to go someplace else because this was not, something I watched. And I used to confuse it with the other one, Law and Order. But
a lot of crossover.
Yes. Yeah, there is. But I want to talk about the production talent. That's the behind the scenes people. It was executive produced by Tom Fantana, who also did Saint Elsewhere, have several Emmy Awards. Barry Levinson was the producer of films like Diner, Rain Man, Wag the Dog, Good Morning in Vietnam, and some of a long list. Then there was Paul Atanasio, and I hadn't heard of him before. He did Quiz Show and Donnie Brasco and many, many more. And of course, lastly, David Simon, who made later on a series called The Wire, which became very, very popular. But David Simon was a journalist for 12 years, and he really knew Baltimore. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's based on David Simon's book when he wrote. I believe when he was at the Baltimore Sun.
Spent the better part of a year with them. Yeah.
Yeah, and it is really intense thinking about the influence that a show can have, because I was looking at a cast and crew reunion from a couple of years ago, featuring a lot of the talent and the actors. And they were trying to describe kind of what they were most proud about on that show. And I forgot who it might have been. Might have been David Simon. Might have been Barry Levinson. I can't remember. But the most prideful moment was being able to break all of those rules. Like, well, how do those rules get broken? What did that mean for other shows? And I saw somewhere someone had made this line, right, from Homicide to a show like Oz on HBO, which didn't really blow up, but it's still kind of in that early prestige kind of TV world.
Wasn't that Tom Fantana too?
I think so. Was it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, okay.
And it kind of led HBO to say, let's try something a little bit more kind of pushing the envelope. Sopranos. Sopranos is taking off, and then in the wake of the Sopranos, it comes full circle back to Simon, and you get The Wire.
Kate just told me it was Tom Fantana.
Yeah.
Okay.
And as Kelly said, I definitely want to talk about the dialogue, but here's a little bit from Homicide: Life on the Street. This is from the 5th season, where in this documentary-themed episode, here the detectives offer advice to potential suspects.
You have got the absolute right to remain silent.
Of course you do. You're a criminal. Criminals always have the right to remain silent.
We're talking about sacred freedoms here, notably your Fifth Amendment protection against self-incrimination. Hey, if it was good enough for Ollie North and Mark Furman, who the hell are you to incriminate yourself the first opportunity?
Get it straight. A police detective paid government money to put you in prison is explaining your absolute right to shut up before you say anything stupid.
So, with no offense meant to Michael Douglas, this was not the streets of San Francisco. We weren't seeing police chases and the crime suspect of the week, but this was taking you into this precinct. And it goes back to David Simon's reporting for The Sun and being on this beat with the homicide detectives for so long, for the better part of a year, as I said. Ed Burns was his writing partner in the show. He was a former detective and a public school teacher. So he was somebody who knew this world. So they had these system of checks and balances to keep this real. And so it was pioneering in making it so interior, also bringing in these fabulous actors, Ned Beatty, Giancarlo Esposito, Richard Belzar, and then landing people like Robin Williams, who wanted to be on the show, and they described Robin Williams being on the show and that really elevating what they could do, because then people were very much paying attention. Because if Robin Williams was going to choose this as his platform, they knew it was something good. But yeah, they just changed the whole genre, as we said in the introduction, and led all the way to The Sopranos and beyond.
And we'd be remiss to just not mention Andre Braugher as Detective Pendleton, R.I.P., from last year. But if you want some vintage Andre, this is your move. And last thing I want to just quickly say too, what I find kind of funny about this whole thing about Peacock getting the rights back to stream Homicide, it was part of this whole Peacock being on top of the world thing. You could still buy it on DVD, and it didn't really occur to me until now. It's we have officially moved past. Nothing was stopping anybody
What are
from
these
going
words,
to Walmart.
DVD?
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
40 bucks. It still is 40 bucks at Walmart or Target for the complete series.
Yeah,
And
it's
DVD
not
players
the
like
same
20
thing.
bucks now, you know. And so I'm glad that a lot of people can.
But then you got to press the button. You
You
got to put
do.
the thing in the thing. And
Okay, before you two go off, I have two more things I want to mention. They experimented with format. So sometimes they did a single all-season story. Other times they did one-episode stories, which is unheard of now. And the last thing is, I know this from David Simon when he visited the Neiman Foundation. I'm a Neiman alum. He had a penchant for putting in names of people that he didn't like or liked. And so one of my Neiman classmates is in. You can check to see real people's names in who have characters in various places. Oh, Bill Marimo. He knows. Yeah, I'll tell you. Yeah.
I thought it was you could maybe work a little bit for it.
No. But he was funny that way. So if people know journalist names, you can go through his shows and pick out real names of real people.
Well, now people have something to do one of these last summer weekends. All right, well, coming up, CNN finding the funny in news. It's launching a new comedy show. That and more next on The Culture Show. Stay with us.
Everyday people.
It's spring of my sophomore year of high school, and I am standing at the foot of our nation's capital.
Personal stories.
And I feel so important. I was about to go lobby Congress. Unfortunately for me, the advocacy process was not going exactly as I had planned.
Stories from the stage. Sunday night at 7 on GBH 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you.
And M. Steinert & Sons Pianos, the region's authorized Steinway dealer, presents the return of the Symphony Hall Piano Event, Friday, September 6th through Sunday the 8th at Symphony Hall. msteinert.com. And Discovery Museum in Acton, inspiring learning through hands-on science. 2024 recipient of the National Medal for Museum and Library Service. Visitors can explore balls, ramps, and chain reactions through September 26th. DiscoveryActon.org.
Protesting an autocratic regime can be dangerous and all-consuming. In Iran, dissenters face harassment and state-sponsored violence. Even when it cost the life of his best friend, this man had to keep going.
But it was not my choice. I was in the middle of war as a soldier.
The final part of her investigation into lethal dissent, next time on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Welcome back to The Culture Show. I'm Jared Bowen, live from our GBH studio at the Boston Public Library. I'm joined by co-hosts Callie Crossley and James Bennett II. If you're just tuning in, it's our Arts and Culture Week in Review, which includes CNN pushing into comedy with its forthcoming show, Have I Got News for You? This is very interesting, I think, especially coming this week, which is such a news-heavy week, of course, with the Democratic National Convention. We also saw the return of Jon Stewart. Jon Stewart went back to The Daily Show earlier this year, and we, on this show, I think, talked about whether that would still resonate, and it turns out it did still resonate. The reason I think this is interesting is because we had learned when Jon Stewart started The Daily Show that all of a sudden there was a whole generation of people getting their news from places other than the typical network evening news or newspapers that suddenly comedy, or at least that Prism, was a venue for getting news, and now CNN is dabbling here as well.
Well, first I want to remind people that Jon Stewart said back in the day, you have to know the news stories to get the joke, and so he was concerned that people didn't do that often. This isn't CNN's first foray into comedy. They tried it with the comedian D.L. Hughley, who actually spoke at the Democratic National Convention last year. It was called D.L. Hughley Breaks the News. That was in 2009 when they canceled it, stayed on about 1 year. I think he's personality is a little edgier. This is going to be Roy Wood Jr. as the host with Amber Ruffin and this other guy that I don't really know, Michael Ian Black. I mean, it's fine. But I don't know him.
Sorry, Mike.
He does have a pretty good resume.
Yeah. All right, okay. I just don't know him. Okay. By the way, D.L. Hughley lost the job after he was taking cameras into a marijuana dispensary to fulfill his prescription, and CNN said, no, not funny, and that's the end of you. So I think these kinds of formats can work, particularly if you do know the news and if you're funny and have certain kinds of personalities.
Yeah, I'm glad that Roy Wood Jr. finally got his hosting gig. I'm thinking about the departure of Trevor Noah. They're doing all the turnover, what's going to happen. Then at the Emmys, him mouthing like, hire a host. It's me. And like to see him on top.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's funny.
And so this show, by the way, has been a long-running show in the UK, and so they have tried to export this a couple times with various success. It never really took off here, but it sounds like the structure of this is you have these hosts and a rotating collection of guests who will be celebrities, politicians, comedians. It's a news quiz show. Does this sound familiar?
Yes.
As we're talking on an NPR station? Like, wait, don't tell me, but for television?
Yes.
So if that audience can carry forward, it is a great way to look at the news. And Wait, Don't Tell Me, of course, is a very successful show. So if this is to be construed as the television version of this, there's a lot of potential for success here.
Roy Wood Jr. says he wants people to say, to remember the CNN, this is CNN, and say, this is CNN?
Well, no, I think that's great because I'll be real, my first reaction to this was like, this is CNN. That was a good, then I was like, wait a second. This is actually a good thing, I think, because CNN is very much leaning into what it is. It is kind of dropping the guise, right, of being like, this is the definitive, real, straightforward, dry, news source. It's been shedding that identity for a while. But this is, I feel like, another step in that direction. I mean, it has a section on HBO Max when you log in. It's part of Warner Brothers Discovery. CNN is entertainment, like much news is and can be. And so this is not...
Well, their analysis of the DNC was pretty good this week.
Yes, that is true.
As somebody who watched a lot of it on CNN. And by the way, that show starts on September 14th. But that isn't the only push for comedy in news this week. Of course, The Onion has existed for a long time, but this reads like a headline ripped from The Onion. The Onion, the satirical newspaper, is back in print. For real. This isn't a joke.
Yes.
I know. I was shocked by this.
So we're seeing this in a few instances, and I'm very curious about both of your takes on this, that there is a demand. Their audience told them, we want the physical paper to read The Onion, so they're doing it.
One of the organizers of this, or the leaders of this back to print movement, says it's much like some of the young kids today reclaiming vinyl, that folks want to have what they may perceive as an original source or a primary source of this. And so for them, this has always been great for them. Subscriptions, however, are $100 a year. I think that's great for them. Just say it right up front. We can't print this stuff for free.
Yeah. I do also kind of fall into that whole I want to hold the thing. It's a physical kind of relationship with like the media that you consume or whatever. But like just being real, I really like The Onion. And I remember going to the free newspaper stands, opening up the door, grabbing the rag, and then taking it back. And that, to me, was part of the joke. And then when it went digital, that humor kind of went away. I mean, it was still a very funny thing to read online, but it was hilarious sitting down, maybe with, your parents or, some older relatives or teachers or whatever, and you whip out this paper, and like, what is that? And just seeing the general confusion, and also print newspaper, it rules. When you hold it, you're reminded of the art, of printing. I mean, there are reasons why word counts exist. Like column width is a thing. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, and like the people working at The Onion, these are some smart,
very
people,
smart,
very, very clever people.
And there's some clever financial people behind this too. Here's a little bit of from former NBC reporter and current CEO of The Onion, Ben Collins, discussing the reasons why he purchased The Onion on Morning Edition a few days ago.
I had just quit my job because it was a nightmare working in traditional news and covering like neo-Nazis and stuff. And I'd read in Adweek that The Onion was for sale. like aggressively for sale. All of these companies that were being either turned into like AI slop or bought by complete maniacs, I just didn't want that to happen to this. The Onion does this really good job of distilling these things in American life that no one else like can say, right? They can live these very like honest media lives in a way that regular publications can't.
By the way, the CEO of the tech company that bought The Onion also said that he went to Phillips Exeter Academy, where he began his career as such by buying, selling, and gutting the student newspaper.
Wow.
Wait, was this the Geo Media?
Wow.
The Geo Media CEO, Jim Spanfeller?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it is.
Okay, yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, there's been a lot of fun commentary, just cheeky commentary about all of the motivations behind this, which is very interesting.
Wow. Okay.
Well, he was kidding, of course, to make that clear. Although The Onion, yeah, just like your family, James, sometimes you could look at it and think, I wonder.
Is that real? Yeah, exactly.
My favorite one, by the way, was, I think it was from, it got turned into one of their daily calendars. The MFA Boston doesn't even have a Mona Lisa. I omitted a couple of expletives there, but I kept that on my desk for a long time.
That's funny.
All right. And next, a TikTok influencer turns demure into the word du jour. So maybe we should just play some of this video, and then we can talk and try to decode and decipher demure. Here's TikTok creator Jules LeBron in her hugely viral video.
You see how I do my makeup for work? Very demure, very mindful. I don't come to work with a green cut crease. I don't do too much. I'm very mindful while I'm at work. See how I look very presentable? The way I came to the interview is the way I go to the job. A lot of you girls go to the interview looking like Marge Simpson and go to the job looking like Patty and Selma. Not demure. I'm very modest. I'm very mindful. You see my shirt? Only a little chichi out, not my chocho.
All right, so James, I don't mean to profile, but you are the youngest one at the set here, so explain demure to us.
Okay. Oh, well, it's falling to me to explain demure. That's because I'm also still trying to figure it out. Listen.
Oh, please.
Okay. All right. First of all, I'm trying to figure out if this is like supposed to be funny.
Yes.
I'm laughing so hard whenever I hear that, but there does seem to be like this bit of sincerity that comes with it.
Okay, that's what I thought too.
Okay, and listen, right? Like there is this idea of like, presentability and like, putting yourself together, putting that best foot forward. And I can't help but think that is maybe a bit of like a Gen Z, like TikToker backlash to maybe this like millennial aesthetic of just kind of rolling with it, kind of like being whatever, kind of rolling out of bed and going to your job looking like, Patty and Selma. And so I don't know, I do find it funny, but I also am kind of in the camp of like there might be a legitimate kind of like, this is what our kind of barrier divide is from this older kind of millennial kind of crew. We got it together.
And before we get to you, Kelly, I should explain. So a lot of people are making videos now about the things they're doing. We're being very demure right now talking on this show, and we're being very polite on NPR.
Look how I did my lipstick. It's very demure, very mindful, and cutesy. Jennifer Lopez, we spoke about her earlier, has a video where she is sipping out of a bottle of champagne. I do not chug it, she says. I'm very demure, very mindful. I am sipping.
Oh, no, I bet she's chugging now.
And
I don't think so.
I want to be a bit more explicit too before we move on or anything about the meaning of it as well, because I think we've all danced around. I think we all kind of have it in our head, but just so everyone knows, according to her, it's just the opposite of being extra. Her whole thing is
too
let's
much.
not do too much.
Right. Merriam-Webster says shy,
I
modest,
love being
shy
extra,
and modest.
It's still Brett Summer for me.
But see, that's supposed to be a direct, a pushback against Brett Summer. That's what I'm understanding it to be, because Charlie XCX is saying, be out there, be confident, be whatever. And she's saying, you don't have to do too much. Be demure. Be mindful.
But when I tried to read other young people write about this, a lot of them pointed out this is also responding to the way women are told they're supposed to conduct themselves. So
Well,
there
that's
is
true.
supposed to be a hint of irony here.
Yes.
So, but I'm with James. I can't figure out if it's irony or if it's instructions or if it's both.
I think it's both. She has, Jules, has 1.9 followers. Hey, by the way, the White House posted a clip saying President Biden's student debt cancellation was very mindful, very demure. Dunkin' called its pumpkin flavors demure. United called the view of a sunset from a plane very demure. Just letting you know.
And now
everybody's
it's-
on top of it.
And everyone's on top of it, which means that it's now dead. But that's okay.
That's true.
Because you can be demure in the C-suite, and
That's
you
true.
can be brat in the street suite.
I guess that's true.
There we go.
Spotify has a demure playlist.
Well, it's also about the power of TikTok because, yeah, with these followers and the money that came along with it, it's allowed
Jules
LeBron to fulfill their wishes for transgender surgery. So the whole procedure, and they're getting flown all over the country now to
I
show
love
up
it.
at makeup sessions and other things. So, and this all, by the way, just happened in the last few weeks.
Also, apparently, I just read this. She was extended an invitation to speak at the DNC and respectfully declined because of a wig appointment.
Because she's very demure,
Very
very mindful. She wasn't going to show up doing too much.
Yeah.
And she respectfully declined because she's demure. That is our very elegant transition to the lightning round. That always is. This is the part of the show where we talk about the headlines, the stories that caught our attention this week. Callie, what's yours?
Beyonce is expanding her moguldom into premium whiskey. I did not know this, but apparently she drinks premium whiskey. She's fond of it, and it's noted in many of her songs on Cowboy Carter. This bottle that she's just produced, by the way, she sought out the guy who does Moët and wanted to work with him specifically on a new taste. So it's very original to what she did. It's named after her great-grandfather, Davis Hogue. It's called Sir Davis, and it's $89 a bottle.
I love when the design goes into the bottle too,
Yes.
just like
It's beautiful.
Brad Pitt did with his
Yeah.
with Angelina.
Yeah.
The winery they had and that Miraval
Yeah,
rosé bottle,
beautiful.
which he designed because he has such an interest in architecture.
Beautiful.
I have yet to independently verify, but apparently it's honestly pretty good.
Well, it sounds like it.
Just, you know.
Yeah, this guy, I mean, the one that Dr. Bill, I forgot what his last name is, who is supposed to be Dr. Bill Lumsden. He is the master distiller and blender, and it has rye, malted barley, harmonious blend of fruit and spice, notes of orange, raisins, cloves, cinnamon, and ginger.
We'll have to have a culture show taste. James, what's the headline that caught your attention? Quickly, lightning round.
So I'm thinking about an article that I read in the New Yorker. It's called "Popping the Bubble of Noise-Canceling Headphones," and it just basically is about how noise-canceling headphones used to be kind of niche, and now they're everywhere. And the author then realized that headphones that are noise-canceling are fundamentally anti-social devices. It's a pretty good read. It also just happens to come as I am back in the headphone market to replace the noise-canceling headphones of my own. So I will have a lot to think about this weekend, and so should you.
And the headline that caught my attention is Frank Lloyd Wright's only skyscraper is set to close. I had no idea
I didn't
that
know he had
Frank
a
Lloyd Wright had designed a skyscraper.
Me
Of course, he was a great mid-century architect. He really changed architecture in this country. His architecture was so much about outside in, but a lot of homes, the Guggenheim, of course, a lot of other buildings. But in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, he decided that rather go out, he would go up. And so he built this building in 1956. It's a tower, and it is something that really calls to nature. He called it the tree that escaped the crowded forest because it was supposed to be built in Manhattan. They ended up building it in Oklahoma, but it does echo the prairies, it echoes trees and the way it's designed in branches and roots. And sadly, it is on the National Historic Register, but it is in some trouble because financial shenanigans have closed it, but hopefully somebody will step in. So it's not going to be torn down or anything, but it's worth knowing that that's where his lone skyscraper is.
Who knew?
Well, that is all for this edition of The Culture Show. Callie, what's coming up on Under the Radar this weekend?
2 segments linked to the vibrant Black year-round and summer community on Martha's Vineyard. The first is a deep dive into generational legacy ownership of Black folks, co-authored by one co-author is Richard Taylor, and the second is a 20-year-old book The Emperor of Ocean Park, set on Martha's Vineyard, that has found new life as an MGM Plus streaming series.
Which sounds very exciting. James, what are you working on?
We are dropping a little feature for your radio listening pleasure about the youth up in Cambridge that are working in a hip-hop collective educational setting. Basically, they're getting in there, learning how to make music, and these kids are talented, and it's great to listen to.
Sounds fabulous. And tune in on Monday for the one-man media conglomerate Matt Farley, the Danvers-based singer-songwriter who's released more than 25,000 songs. We'll also talk to Guster's Adam Gardner on making the music industry more sustainable. And we mark the pioneering pianist Charles Ives. Speaking of blazing new paths in the arts, Charles Ives' 150th birthday. Thanks today to the BPL technical and logistics crew, Maddie Geyer, Bill Francis, Sandra Lopez-Burke, Juan Jose Cadena, Chris Hanks, and Amanda Francis. Also thanks to City Table, the Lennox Hotel, and the Newsfeed Cafe. And today, this hurts. We have to say goodbye to associate producer Molly McCall. Molly has been a key part of our arts coverage here on GBH. They were instrumental in launching the Culture Show, made their mark for so long on Open Studio and at GBH News with original reporting. Molly is moving on, and we resent them for it, but we also applaud them for it. Molly, we will miss you. I'm Jared Bowen. Have an art-filled weekend.
Where's Mary? Where is she? Where is she? She's just about to close up the library!
The Culture Show is made possible in part by a generous contribution from the Fiducia Fund, proud to support this station's art and culture programming.
GBH